I entered our house through the front door, which snapped shut behind me. The smell of Suzanne's perfume, always present, hanging in the air. I untied my tie, bearing the burden of yet another exhausting workday. "Lift off my shoulders slowly," I yelled out to Suzanne. My voice reverberated throughout the silent home. Not a reply. Normal these days. I ignored the nagging notion that something wasn't quite right between us as I thought. There were highs and lows in marriage. This was only a rough patch, after all. There was a strong knock on the door, so I headed to the kitchen and grabbed a cold beer from the refrigerator, popping the cap, sliced through the quiet. I frowned, put down the wine, and went to respond. The smell of booze hit me like a wave the moment I swung the door open. My neighbor from 2 homes down is Brian Miller. Stood there, swaying just a little, with a smug smile on his face. He stammered and pushed past me into the foyer, saying, "Well, if this isn't Raphael Howard, the man of the moment." I suppressed the temptation to shoo him back out onto the porch by clenching my jaw. "Brian, you've had too much to drink. Return home." He chuckled. There was a sharp sound that made my teeth tense. "Yes, I will. I do, however, have a small gift for you first." He extracted a little, delicate object from his pocket. "Do you recognize these?" He hung a pair of panties in front of my face, and my stomach fell. Suzanne's underwear. "Your spouse," Brian went on, his tone brimming with conceit. "In bed, she's a wild cat. We've completed more than 40 of them." He laughed as he threw the panties at me, causing them to land on my chest and then fall to the ground. I had a hard time breathing for a while. The impact of Brian's comments seemed to cause the universe to shift on its axis. "Suzanne, my spouse. 40 times. You're not telling the truth." Even though I knew deep down that it was true, I still managed to choke out. The distant emotions, the late evenings at work, the way she recoiled from my contact. Everything became horrifyingly clear at once. Brian opened his lips to reply, but we were distracted by the sound of footfall on the stairs. Turning, we both saw Suzanne coming down. Her expression was one of icy indifference. With a tone that chilled the hair on my back, she said, "John, using my middle name, it's confirmed. I'm going to leave you. You will hear from my attorney shortly." I looked at her, trying to see any trace of the woman I had married and spent years loving. However, nothing was present. Just cold detachment as she validated my worst suspicions. "That's accurate, then?" With an abnormally calm voice, I said, "Both of you and him?" Suzanne lacked even the grace to display embarrassment. "Yes, it has persisted for several months. I apologize for forcing you to learn this way, but refrain from—" I interrupted by raising a hand. "Act as though it doesn't matter how I found out." I turned to face Brian, who was gleefully observing our discussion. "How about you? You two will always regret this." Brian chuckled, obviously not paying any attention to what I said, but for a split second, Suzanne's expression of disinterest wavered before it was replaced. She said, "Come on, Brian," and walked to the door. "We're heading out." I stood there motionless as they walked away. The hollow home reverberated with the sound of the door shutting behind them. It had a sense of closure that made all I had known seem to come to an end. I walked slowly into the living room and collapsed into the couch. Night was gathering and the house went dark all around me, but I didn't move to put on any lights. I sat there and allowed the shame and sorrow to come over me in waves. But as the hours passed, another thing started to take hold. A stern, unwavering resolve. They believed they would escape this unharmed. They were clueless about what was ahead, in the still darkness of the house we used to share. I made plans for the following morning. I awoke feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. The agony persisted. There was a persistent ache in my chest, but it was eclipsed by one main goal: retaliation. I grabbed my phone and combed through my contacts until I came across the name I was searching for. My best friend since college is Jerry Nolan. He was the one who would comprehend my situation, if anyone. Before Jerry's scratchy voice could be heard, the phone rang twice. "Raphael. This is Prehistoric Man. Everything all right?" "No," I replied plainly. "Brian Miller is the cheater Suzanne has been seeing." The person on the other end of the line took a sharp gasp. "Raphael, I'm very sorry, Jesus. Would you like me to visit?" "Actually, I had hoped that we could grab coffee together. I'm in need of your guidance." An hour later, I was reliving the previous night's events in a small cafe across from Jerry. As I spoke, his hands clenched into fists on the table, and his face darkened. When I was done, he muttered, "Those bastards. Raph, you should concentrate on moving on even though I know you're in pain. Don't allow them to depress you." I gave a head shake, bending inward more. "Jerry, I'm not letting them get away with this. They made me feel ashamed. Everything we co-built was destroyed by them. They should pay, please." Jerry's eyes grew a little wider. "Raph, please consider what you are saying. In the long run, getting even won't make you feel better. Perhaps not." I gave in, but it's going to make them feel much worse. After giving me a lengthy look, he sighed. "You appear to have made up your mind. Please exercise caution. Don't take any foolish actions." I nodded, appreciating his concern but preparing myself for what came next. "Regards, Jerry. Thank you for your support." As I walked out of the cafe, I took out my phone once more and dialed a new number. Malcolm Barnard was a private investigator I had previously collaborated with on a case. "It's Raphael Howard, Malcolm. I'm in need of your assistance. When can you get together?" "In the afternoon." I took a seat in Malcolm's disorganized office and listed the things I needed from him. "Everything you can discover about Brian Miller and Suzanne Howard is what I desire." I informed him about their habits and vulnerabilities. "No detail is overlooked if there are any skeletons in their closets." Malcolm's eyebrow shot upward. "Raphael, this sounds personal. Are you certain you want to choose this path?" I maintained a steady glance. "Whatever it takes or costs, I want them to realize how foolish it was to cross me." Gradually nodding, he reached for a notepad. "Okay then, let's get going." I threw myself into my plan over the next 3 weeks. During the day, playing the character of the wronged but dignified husband, I went to work as normal. However, each evening I meticulously examined the data Malcolm provided, constructing a plan that would destroy Brian and Suzanne's lives. I became aware of Brian's conceit, his negligence in the workplace, and his propensity for binge drinking. I saw the weaknesses in their relationship, the fears they both attempted to cover up. Then I made a hit. It was modest at first. A couple of shrewd remarks made to Brian's coworkers alluded to his lack of professionalism. Slowly but gradually, anonymous communications to Suzanne hint at Brian's infidelity. I started planting the seeds of uncertainty and strife. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerry one evening as I was sitting at my computer, taking my time creating another series of texts. "How are things going for you?" It was printed. I hesitated, mulling about my answer. How did I fare? Although the ache persisted, it had solidified into something more substantial, less warm, something that kept me moving forward with unwavering resolve. "I'm all right," I replied back, finishing up a few things before pressing send. I couldn't resist grinning. They were clueless about what was ahead. However, they would discover very quickly that betraying Raphael Howard was the worst decision they had ever made. It had taken weeks of careful planning to get to this point. As Brian boldly walked towards the entrance of the Horizon Corp. building, I stood in the shadows across the street. Get ready for the annual banquet of the firm. He was wearing his nicest suit. He had no idea that this night would be the beginning of the end for him. Something buzzed on my pocket phone. Malcolm texted me. "Everything ready. Wishing you luck." I suppressed a tiny smile to watch Brian walk into the building. After that, I headed to a local cafe, placed my coffee order, and took a seat to wait. It wasn't too lengthy. My phone started to light up with notifications after an hour. The crisis that was developing at the Horizon Corp. Gala was causing social media to explode. I perused the posts, each one bearing witness to my meticulous preparation. Photographs that showed Brian in sexually suggestive poses with different ladies, expertly altered by a hacker. Malcolm had supplied me screenshots of explicit texts he claimed to have sent to co-workers. These were obviously fake but looked quite real and were interspersed throughout. Actual pictures and letters from his liaison with Suzanne, giving the entire package an additional degree of credibility. I could see the scenario inside Brian's head going pale as rumors filtered through the throng. His boss's disapproving scowl, his co-workers' startled and disgusted stares, his carefully constructed image collapsing before his very eyes. A fresh round of posts with videos of Brian being let out of the building surfaced while I was sipping my coffee. His expression was one of bewilderment and rage. I focused on one, relishing the moment of his humiliation in front of others. My cell phone rang. The name Suzanne flickered across the screen. I listened to it go to voicemail, picturing her frantic call to Brian. Don't worry about her. Her turn, I supposed, will come around soon enough. I headed to the bank first thing in the morning. I walked with a spring in my step. As I got closer to the cashier, I tried to look as worried as possible. "Greetings for the morning," I stated. "I have some account adjustments to make." The cashier gave a kind grin. "Naturally, Mr. Howard. With what may I assist you?" "I have to stop using my wife's joint account at all," I said, allowing a note of concern to float into my voice. "And I would like to move the majority of the money to a new independent account that is only in my name." The cashier's grin wavered a little. "I understand. Could you tell me why?" Leaning in, I did. Cowardly, I lowered my voice. "We are having some problems, my wife and I. She might try to empty our accounts, I'm concerned. My goal is to safeguard our possessions until we can resolve the matter through legal means." After several calls to managers and some time, it was completed. I knew that Suzanne would be in for a rude awakening if she attempted to access our joint savings account after I left the bank. I waited for very little time. My phone was inundated with texts and calls from Suzanne that afternoon. I let them all go to voicemail, the sound of each progressively desperate message growing louder. I finally made the decision to confront her when night fell. I headed home, bracing myself for the inevitable encounter. Suzanne was on me as soon as I walked through the door, her expression twisted with anger. "How on earth did you accomplish that?" She let out a cry. "They informed me that the account was frozen when I attempted to withdraw money today. Raphael, where's our money?" I caught her cold look. "Our funds? I had no idea we still had anything in common." "Suzanne, did you not say that you were going to leave me?" After a brief moment of weakness, she recovered. "This is not something you can do. I am entitled to rights. I'll sue you to the hilt." "Of course," I answered, sarcasm seeping into my voice. "I have no doubt that the unfaithful wife who degraded her husband will receive a lot of sympathy from the courts. Suzanne, you desired independence. You understand. Without access to our joint funds, I watched as the truth of her circumstances began to set in. All of a sudden, she was extremely exposed. Her eyes were starting to show fear instead of rage. "Please, Raphael." Her tone became softer as she spoke. "We are able to resolve this, can we?" "No," I interrupted her. "We are unable to. Suzanne, you made your decision. You now have to put up with it." When I got to the landing, I brushed past her and made for the stairs. I pivoted to refocus on her. Standing in the foyer, she appeared frail and disoriented. And Suzanne, too, of course. I made a down call. "Perhaps you should see how your boyfriend is doing. It seems like he's not having a good day, that's it." I withdrew to my study and took a seat, closing the door behind me. Downstairs, I could hear Suzanne's muffled weeping. The sound, which formerly would have crushed my heart, now strengthened my resolve. This was only the start. Brian and Suzanne would wish they had never met by the time I was done. Later on in the evening, I ended up in O'Malley's, the dimly lit bar where I knew Brian enjoyed his drinks. As expected, he was hunched over the bar with a half-empty whiskey glass in front of him. I gestured to the bartender for a drink of my own as I slid onto the stool next to him. Brian could hardly focus on me with bloodshot eyes. His features twisted into a scowl as recognition finally set in. "You," he stammered. "Is this what you did? You somehow positioned me." I tasted my drink and enjoyed the heat. "Brian, I have no clue what you're talking about. I've heard you've been having issues at work. It's unfortunate." He lunged for me, but all he managed to do in his inebriation was almost topple over his seat. I put my hand on his shoulder to steady him. Bending near, I whispered, "You're in over your head. You'll wish you'd never seen her when this is all over." Brian's eyes grew wide, a glimpse of panic poking through his inebriated stupor. I squeezed his shoulder and got to my feet. I said, "Enjoy your drink, Brian. Before long, you might not be able to buy many more of them." I was leaving the bar when I felt Brian's gaze piercing my back, but I chose not to turn around. My point had been made. I didn't have much time to enjoy my first victory over Brian and Suzanne. It was obvious it was time to tighten the screws as I sat in my study going over Malcolm's most recent reports. The suspension from his employment and public humiliation were only the beginning for Brian. It was time to guarantee his total downfall as a professional. Picking up the phone, I phoned a number I had become familiar with over the previous several weeks. "It's Raphael, Clark. We must discuss Brian's colleague, Brian Clark Knapp. I'd built myself up as an ally," responded right away. Raphael: "Hello, what are your thoughts? I believe it's time for us to get serious about things at work. What is your opinion on the propagation of various rumors?" The person on the other end of the line hesitated. What sort of rumors are we discussing here? With a chilly smile on my lips that might spark a sexual harassment lawsuit, I reclined in my chair. Not much substantial, just enough noise to create a whisper. "Be mindful of this. Raphael, Jesus, that is a severe matter." "Yes," I answered. "Brian wasted little time in destroying my life. Why should I be kind to him at all?" Clark let out a sigh. "Okay, I'm on board, but it won't if this comes back to haunt me." "I'll make sure you're safe," I told him. "Brian will be out on his ass before he knows what hit him if you just do your share." I hung up and, without having access to our joint accounts, turned to look at Suzanne. I anticipated her struggle. It was time to sharpen the edge a bit more. I opened my email and sent a note to our group of pals, phrased carefully so as to seem kind rather than retaliatory. "I hope this email finds you well, dear friends." I felt compelled to confront the unspoken issue. My breakup with Suzanne. I wanted to clear up certain rumors that I know many of you have probably heard. I am extremely hurt by Suzanne's decision to leave our marriage for another man. More important to me is her well. She's recently made some dubious financial choices, and I worry that in order to support her lifestyle, she would try to borrow money from others. It's not resentment that I tell you this. Rather, it's real care. If Suzanne asks for financial assistance, please consider your response before giving in. I would hate for any of you to be used at this trying time. I appreciate your help and understanding. Raphael. I sent the email well aware that Suzanne would no longer have any source of income to rely on. Allow her to bear the entire consequence of her choices. I kept a distance from the unfolding of my intentions as the days went by. Already a precarious employee at work, Brian now had to deal with murmurs and curious looks everywhere he went. The allegations of sexual harassment quickly gained traction, and I anticipated that HR became engaged. Meanwhile, Suzanne was fighting to keep up her act of normalcy. One evening, I got a call from Catherine, a mutual friend. "Raphael, Catherine is here. I must speak with you regarding Suzanne." I pretended to be worried. "Is everything in order?" "Catherine, what is happening?" She approached me and requested a loan. Catherine spoke, her tone tense with unease. "Quite a significant one. I recalled both of us from your email. I simply cannot decide what to do. I really apologize for placing you in this situation." I spoke, letting my tone be tinged with a little sincere pity. "You are such a terrific buddy to have thought of it at all, but I must be honest with you, Catherine. If you give that money to her, I doubt you'll ever see it again." Catherine let out a deep sigh. "I thought you may say that." Oh my, what a mess. Suzanne never did, in my opinion. "Yes, I am aware," I whispered. "I didn't either. But I guess that's how people evolve. Or perhaps we simply never got to know her at all." I couldn't help but smile as I hung up. As intended, Suzanne's support network was disintegrating. Before long, the only person she and Brian had would be each other, and there were strains even in that connection. Malcolm had heard rumors that Brian had begun to drink more heavily. His actions started to become erratic and unpredictable. Suzanne grew accustomed to his assurance. Now Swagger saw a man engulfed in his own anger and insecurity. My phone rang one evening as I was reviewing some papers and saw a text from Jenny, an unexpected source. I had not spoken to an old friend in years. "Raphael, I hope this isn't going too far, but I've heard about Suzanne's situation. I'm available if you need someone to talk to." I spent a long time staring at the message, a range of emotions churning inside of me. Jenny was always understanding and helpful, everything Suzanne had shown herself incapable of being. I thought for a second about answering, attempting to establish a human connection. However, I was now unable to afford diversion, not right now. As everything was falling into place so flawlessly, I put the phone down without answering. I returned my focus to the current task. The weeks passed. I stood by and saw as Brian and Suzanne's life kept falling apart. Brian, who was previously the epitome of conceited success, appeared worn out and decrepit. Every time I glanced at him, Suzanne was displaying fractures in her painstakingly crafted facade as she struggled to keep up her glossy exterior. The doorbell rang when I was in my study going over some legal documents. I frowned as I glanced at my phone's security camera footage. When I noticed who was standing on my porch, my eyebrows shot up. For a split second, Suzanne, I thought about brushing her off, but my curiosity won out. I wanted to personally witness her decline. When I opened the door, I was nearly startled by what I saw. The sleek, self-assured woman who had abandoned me was no longer there. She was replaced by a person I could hardly recognize from her disheveled attire, wrinkles and black circles under her eyes. She continued, shaking her voice, "Raphael, I must speak with you." I rested my back on the door jamb, with crossed arms. Discuss precisely what? She could not look up into my eyes. I've made a grave error, now that I see it. I was lost and bewildered. I was mistaken to believe that Brian embodied all my desires, very incorrect. At her words, I had a rush of activity and satisfaction, but my expression remained neutral. "And Suzanne, what are you expecting me to do with that?" With hope flickering in her eyes, she looked up. "Maybe we could try again," I reasoned. "We once had a wonderful thing, and I know I wounded you. For a little while, maybe we could find our way back to that." I let myself think that it would bring her back, rebuilding our mutual life. But then I thought back to that evening, watching Suzanne tear my world apart while Brian sneered at her icy indifference. "No," I answered in a harsh tone. "We are unable to." "Please, Raphael," she pleaded. Her eyes were filled with tears. "I'll take any action. I've lost everything, including my money and friends. Brian has evolved. He's not the man I believed him to be. All I have left is you." A chilly smile appeared on my face. "Suzanne, you're incorrect there. I'm not with you, not any longer. Your bed was made. Now take a nap in it." Her expression twisted. Tears were streaming down her face. "How could you be so unkind?" "Raphael, this isn't like you." "It's true," I stated. "The night you deceived him, the man you knew died. Suzanne, this is who I am now. Furthermore, you are the only one at fault." I ignored her cries and entreaties and shut the door in her face, making my way back to my study. I had a feeling of fulfillment. It was much too late when Suzanne finally understood how big of a mistake she had made. Malcolm Raphael gave me a call later that night. "I have some fascinating information to share with you." He spoke without introduction. I straightened my chair up. "What's in your possession?" "It appears that Brian is struggling to maintain composure. Malcolm stated that he was let go from his position today. It seems that he was ultimately exposed by those rumors of sexual harassment. He has reportedly been drinking a lot, and there have been allegations of some really erratic conduct." I gave a nod, despite Malcolm's inability to see me. "All right. Anything further?" "Yes. In actuality, he and Suzanne had gotten into a heated argument earlier. When the police arrived, the neighbors had already left when they phoned the police. Though unanticipated, this development was not undesirable. Malcolm, keep an eye on the circumstances. I would like to know whether the situation gets worse after we hang up." I took a seat in my armchair, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and began to consider this new knowledge. The strain was breaking Brian and Suzanne's relationship just as I had intended. I made the decision to stop by Brian's apartment building the following day. I wanted to see for myself how far he'd fallen, but I didn't want to face him personally. I could hear shouted shouts coming from one of the top floors as I got closer to the structure. I instantly recognized Brian's tone of anger. He yelled, "This is all your fault! We wouldn't be in this problem if you hadn't been so damned greedy." "It was my fault," replied Suzanne, her voice harsh with fear and rage. "It was you who was laid off. The one who is addicted to alcohol is you." After a crash, someone screamed without thinking. I dashed up the steps and into the building. Even though I was itching for retribution, I wasn't going to let things get out of hand. Just as I got to Brian's floor, I saw Suzanne running out of his apartment. Tears streamed down her face. In her rush to get away, she almost ran into me. "Raphael!" She gave a start, obviously startled to see me. "How come you're here?" Before I could reply, Brian emerged from the doorway, his angry face twisted. His eyes narrowed ominously at the sight of me. "Well, well," he stumbled, obviously intoxicated. "Take a look at who it is. Have you come to bash now?" I moved ahead of Suzanne and confronted Brian directly. Brian, I think you should just relax. Prior to making a decision you'll later regret. With a rough, bitter laugh, he laughed. Feel regret? There's nothing left for me to regret. I am grateful to you. Is this what you did? You were behind all of this somehow. I regarded him coolly. Brian, you caused this to yourself. Suzanne and you. I just roared with wrath as I sat back and watched. Brian surged at me, but his gait was sluggish and ungainly due to the alcohol. With ease, I move by him and observe as he falters and hits the ground. Behind me, Suzanne gasped. Raphael, let's head out. He is not the same person. I turned to face her, speaking firmly. Suzanne, where precisely do you think you're going? Returning to our home. That is no longer your home. Her expression dimmed, the truth of her predicament beginning to set in. I'm not sure. I simply cannot remain here. After staring at her for a while, I turned to face Brian, who was having trouble standing up. Although I had no sympathy for either of them, I was also aware that allowing things to go worse could make my plans more difficult. This is roughly a mile away from a motel. Finally, I said, Go there. Apply this. I gave her some money after taking out my wallet. I'm going to stop helping you after this. Recognize? Tears filled Suzanne's eyes as she nodded. I'm grateful, Raphael, not in my case. I interrupted her. Nothing between us changes as a result of this. Go now before I decide otherwise. I glanced back to Brian as Suzanne raced out of sight. He had succeeded in getting himself upright using the wall as support. This isn't the end, he snarled. I gave a chilly smile. Yes, Brian, I believe it to be. Honestly, I don't think it started at all. From the beginning, you were beyond your league. I turned around and left Brian to wallow in his own despair after that. Upon leaving the building, I noticed police cars approaching, probably in response to complaints from nearby residents regarding the disturbance. As Brian was carried away in handcuffs, I vanished into the shadows, whining and ranting. Although it was a horrible sight, I had no pity. Justice, in my opinion, was served here. I couldn't help but feel satisfied as I was making my way home. With little any effort on my part, I could see Brian and Suzanne's world collapsing around them. It was much easier for them to destroy themselves than it was for me. It wasn't the end, though. Oh no, I had a lot more planned for them. Their demise was just getting started, and I meant to see it through to the very end. Unexpectedly, not much happened in the weeks after Brian's arrest. I turned my attention to my job and threw myself into tasks I had ignored while plotting my retaliation. But even as I made an effort to go on, I continued to pay close attention to the consequences of my choices. Malcolm sent me with updates on Brian's condition. After a few days, he was freed from prison, but the harm had already been done. His reputation was beyond repair, already in shambles. I made sure of that by letting prospective employers know about his recent incarceration and ongoing problems in an anonymous manner. My phone rang one evening when I was wrapping up some papers. My man, Jerry Raphael, was there. Tonight, how about we go out for a drink? Too much time has passed. I paused for a brief while. My friendships have suffered because I was preoccupied with getting my retribution. However, perhaps it was time to begin reconstructing that aspect of my life. Yes, an hour from now is Jerry O'Malley's. Perfect. I'll see you there, my friend. After an hour, I was seated opposite Jerry in our preferred booth at O'Malley's. With a look of both concern and admiration in his eyes, he observed me while sipping his beer. Raph, you look great. Better than I thought it would be after everything that has transpired. I took a sip of my whiskey and shrugged. I've had time to think things out. Consider them in a larger context. Slowly, Jerry nodded. Suzanne as well. Brian, what news have you received? I flashed a chilly smile. Yes, I have heard a lot. Brian's life is a complete mess. Can't work because he drinks himself to death. Suzanne as well. When I last heard, she was using the couch, attempting to save up enough cash to get by. Jerry's eyes got bigger. Jesus, Raph, I had no notion, but I knew things were horrible. That was unrelated to you, is that right? I maintained a steady glance. Did it really matter if I did? After a prolonged period of silence, he shook his head. I guess not. They placed their wager. You have no right to ensure that they lie in it. We exchanged silent understanding as we clinked glasses. Jerry had experienced a painful divorce of his own. As we continued our conversation, catching up on each other's life, I realized that he, of all people, understood the desire for revenge. I felt a sensation I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since Suzanne's defection, a sense of normalcy. I wasn't thinking only about getting even. I was just a dude enjoying a beverage with his companion. However, that peaceful time was fleeting, just as we prepared to depart. I saw someone I knew stammering into the pub. Brian appeared even more disheveled than when I'd last seen him. Jerry looked after me and muttered a curse. "Are you ready to leave?" I gave a head shake. "No, I'd like to watch this." We observed Brian approaching the bar and requesting a drink. With a cautious gaze, the bartender requested payment in full. When Brian reached for his wallet, he saw it was empty. "Man, come on," he stammered. "Just a single beverage. I'm capable of handling it." The bartender declined with a sway. "I apologize, friend. No cash, no alcohol. These are the guidelines." Anger twisted Brian's face. "Are you aware of who I am? In this town, I used to be somebody." The bartender didn't seem to care. "Yes, and I was attractive and youthful once. Hey, times change. Either pay now or leave." Brian's fists clenched, and I thought for a second he may strike at the bartender, but suddenly his shoulders sagged, his will to fight gone. His hazy eyes met mine as he turned to face the room and whispered, "This is your fault." A blossoming of recognition. "You. This is what you did to me." Jerry tightened up next to me as I gently stood up. "Brian, I did not do anything to you. You ruined things for yourself." About to trip over his own feet, he lumbered over to our table. "My life, career, reputation, you destroyed it all." I refused to back down and met his gaze. "No, Brian. The moment you chose to have a sexual relationship with my wife, you damaged your own life." There was silence in the bar. Everyone is looking at us. Brian cast a madly searching glance about as if he was looking for support. Here, however, he found no allies. "Suzanne is where?" He made a demand. "How are you handling her?" I arched an eyebrow. "Brian, I have not done anything with her. The last I heard, she had no desire to interact with you. I'm not sure I blame her." A shout of wrath cracked something within of Brian. He launched himself at me, but his actions were clumsy and delayed. With ease, I avoided him and observed as he collided with our table, glasses smashing upon the ground. Jerry moved to position himself in the way of Brian and me. "All right, guy, enough. Before things worsen for you, get out of here." Brian stumbled to his feet and gave us both a scowl. He spit out, "This isn't over. Raphael, I'll make you pay for this. You two together." I gave a chilly smile. "I hope you give it a shot." It was plenty for the bartender. He grabbed Brian's arm as he turned to face the bar. "Okay, friend, it's time for you to leave." Curses and threats were hurled at Brian as he was led away. I looked across at Jerry. "I apologize for it. I guess I destroyed our evening." With a sardonic smile, Jerry shook his head. "Are you serious? I haven't felt so excited in months as that. Come on, let's help tidy this up before leaving." We lingered to assist the bartender in tidying up the shattered glass and overturned chairs as we worked. I couldn't help but experience a feeling of fulfillment. It gave me great satisfaction to see Brian so completely destroyed, so different from the haughty man who had teased me earlier that evening. Later, he turned to me and looked serious as Jerry and I left the bar. "Raph, you understand that I must give it to you. I was concerned about you when this whole thing started. I was afraid you would do something foolish, put yourself in danger. However, you've managed this entire situation expertly." With a smile, I gave him a shoulder clap. "Regards, Jerry. I'm grateful for your help during this whole process." After nodding, he paused for a while. "Just use caution. Fine. Brian is a reckless person. You never know what he'll do next. I'm not a concern." I told him that I could take care of both Brian and Suzanne. That evening, as I drove home, I thought about how far I'd come. The hurt from Suzanne's deceit persisted. A vague aching that no longer engulfed me was in my chest. Rather, I felt more resilient and powerful. I had overcome the worst and emerged unscathed. Not getting by, but flourishing. I received a text the following morning from Jenny, the old acquaintance who had gotten in touch with me some weeks prior. "Hello, Raphael. Just dropping by. This time, how are you holding up?" I answered without hesitation. "Jenny, I'm doing great. I appreciate you asking. What if we got coffee together and caught up?" I was looking forward to anything for the first time in months as soon as I clicked send. After Brian's arrest, The months that followed were filled with drawn-out court cases while Suzanne and I fought for our divorce. Though Suzanne had different plans, I had planned for a swift and tidy split. She had engaged Clint as her attorney, drawing a notoriously aggressive and win-at-all-costs type of litigator. As I sat across from my own attorney, Theodore Foster, in his opulent office, long shadows were created on the polished wood desk between us by the morning light streaming through the windows. "Raphael," Theodore's voice started up, grave. "I will not mince words. Suzanne is pursuing everything with her attorney. They are advocating a 50/50th division of all assets. She cheated on me, so I sat back in my chair. My teeth tightened. That isn't taking place. After what she'd done, she doesn't deserve a single penny." With a determined Asian look, Theodore nodded. "I concur. That's the reason I have a suggestion. Well, it's not pretty, but this could be our best chance to hold on to what is truly yours. I pay attention." Leaning forward, I spoke. "Suzanne's affair is used against her. Sophisticated proof of immorality can influence a judgment. Are any of her private messages with you? Pictures? Perhaps." I paused for a brief instant. Utilizing such personal content felt like going too far. But then I thought back to that night, watching Brian sneer, watching Suzanne tear my world apart with her callous indifference. I've said what I wanted to say, cold-voiced. Malcolm has been watching people extremely closely. Theodore furrowed his brow. "The pie, Malcolm? Raphael, how much time have you spent organizing this?" I maintained a steady glance. "Adequate length. Is it sufficient to bury her in the courts?" There was a gradual smile on Theodore's face. "Yes, it will be more than sufficient. Nobody will know what hit Suzanne." I was leaving Theodore's office. I bust my phone. Malcolm texted me. "Suzanne is calling from now on. Wants to have a conversation. Suggestions?" I grinned. Suzanne was beginning to lose hope. "All right. Permitted to pass." I responded to the text. "I'll take care of it." My phone rang a few moments later. I replied, speaking in an impartial tone. "Suzanne, Raphael." Her voice wavered as she spoke. I've been thinking about us a lot lately, regarding all of the events." "Have you just now?" I stated. "I'm in a tone." "Indeed," she went on, her words coming out quickly. "Raphael, I was so wrong. I couldn't find myself, bewildered. But now I see exactly what we had. It was unique. Why don't we try to resolve this?" I nearly burst out laughing at how obvious her ruse was. "Suzanne, let's sort things out. The instant you got into bed with Brian, you ruined all we owned." She uttered, I know, in a beseeching tone. "But mistakes are made by individuals, don't they? We could recreate what we had, start afresh. Raphael, please, just simply come see me. Come talk to me face to face." I pressed my phone's record button as she was speaking. Her desperate attempt at making amends was being recorded word for word, all set to be used in court against her. "Okay, Suzanne," I said, trying not to seem hesitant. "One gathering. That's all I have to offer." "Oh, Raphael, how kind you are," she said, her relief palpable. "I guarantee you won't regret doing this." I hung up. Malcolm sent through another text message. "Brian has communicated with Suzanne. They have a plan in place." I gave a chilly smile. They were, of course. Were they truly under the impression that they could now outwit me? "Continue observing." I responded to the text. Throughout the following several days, I want to follow their every move. Malcolm's reports provided a lucid image. Thinking they were being shrewd, Brian and Suzanne were scheming to get me to sign a big settlement. In order to trick me into thinking I'm safe, they want Suzanne to pretend to be the remorseful wife before moving on. They had no idea. Everything they said and everything they had planned was being painstakingly written down. I had a ton of evidence by the time we entered the courtroom, enough to bury them both. When the trial day finally arrived, I felt a wave of serenity pass over me. This was it, the result of months of scheming and preparation. Theodore showed up at my side as I fixed my tie and was ready to go into the courtroom. "Are you prepared for this?" His eyes glistened with anticipation as he inquired. I nodded, looking determined. More than prepared. "Now let's get this done." As we entered the courtroom, Suzanne and her attorney were visible to me. Although she appeared pale and uneasy, there was a glint of hope in her eyes. That hope was going to die soon. Clint Drew launched into an ardent defense of justice and an equal distribution of assets as soon as the proceedings got underway. He portrayed Suzanne as a loving spouse who had made a mistake and was now looking for atonement. Theodore stood when it was our turn, his expression composed and assured. "Your Honor," he started, "we possess proof that will reveal Mrs. Howard's actual nature and goals." What transpired was a methodical breakdown of Suzanne's case. Theodore played again the tapes of her attempts at making amends, contrasting them with her and Brian's intercepted conversations that exposed their true intentions. I saw Suzanne's face go pale, her eyes glistening with fear, as her carefully crafted story fell apart around her. It was too late for Clint Drew to object as he scurried to extract something from the ruins. Theodore's proof of their premeditated lie dealt the last blow. The plan was to use coercion to get me to settle and then steal the money. The judge studied the evidence, his expression hardening. When at last he did speak, his tone was acerbic with contempt. He replied to Mrs. Howard, "Your actions show a clear pattern of moral misconduct and deception. This evidence leads me to rule in Mr. Howard's favor. Mr. Howard will receive a disproportionate share of the assets, while Mrs. Howard will only receive the absolute minimum as needed by law." My shoulders felt lighter when the judge's gavel dropped, confirming the verdict. It was completed. I had prevailed. As I left the courtroom, I turned to look at Suzanne one more time. Shell-shocked, she sat there. Her hopes for a large compensation were dashed. For a split second, our gazes locked, and in that moment, I witnessed the whole weight of her faults sink in without a word. I turned around and left, leaving Suzanne to deal with the fallout on her own. The weeks that followed the trial were packed with events. As I completed the last divorce-related paperwork, I watched Brian and Suzanne closely. I wanted to cherish every second of their collapsing reality. My inside man at Brian's old job, Clark Knapp, called me early one morning. Raphael Clark said in a low, agitated voice, "You will not believe what is going on. Brian has gone utterly insane." With a chilly smile on my lips, I reclined in my chair. "Tell me everything." A picture of a man falling was depicted by Clark in his words. Brian has been taking up riskier loans out of desperation for money. The banks were getting closer now, threatening to take him to court over unpaid obligations. Not only that, though, Clark went on. "Recall the gossip we did about his erratic actions? They have indeed reached his creditors. Everyone is rushing to gather before he goes absolutely insane." I gave a nod. "I feel satisfied all along. Fantastic effort, Clark. Please keep me informed of any updates." I couldn't help but be amazed at how well my strategy was working as I hung up. Brian's life was a complete mess. Additionally, Suzanne. She was about to make her own desperate move, though. Malcolm's report later that day validated my assumptions. Suzanne had deliberately decided to let Brian go because she saw him as a liability. She's already spoken to Brian's landlord. Malcolm told me and showed me the proof that Brian has been trespassing in his residence. Right now, he's being evicted. I move in a low, chilly whistle. "Suzanne, it's almost admirable." Malcolm went on. "There's more. It's not going well for Brian. He's been yelling and making outrageous threats about taking retribution. I fear he may make a foolish decision." Leaning forward, I became abruptly aware. "What sort of dangers? He is discussing breaking into your home and taking whatever that he can find. Claims he wishes to address you, avenge the damage you caused to his life." My thoughts started to create a strategy. Interesting. "Malcolm, I need you to watch Brian very carefully. When he begins to move on, please let me know. This scheme of his." "Boss, you got it. How do you think?" Even if Malcolm couldn't see it, I smiled. It seems like a good idea to set a trap, one that will definitively put an end to this game. I got ready over the next few days. My home was surrounded by security cameras that were immediately connected to the local police department. I upgraded my locks, put in a cutting-edge alarm system, and waited. I waited for very little time. A storm was raging outside 3 nights later when my phone buzzed with an alert from Malcolm. "They're in motion. Brian and Suzanne are on their way to you. 20 minutes is the ETA." I immediately got to work, making sure everything was in its proper position and calling the police as I went through the house. 911. "Which emergency do you have?" "My name is Michael Howard." "Calm down," I said. I have good cause to think someone is going to break into my residence. I've already given Detective Johnson proof of the danger. He ought to be anticipating my call. Recognized. Mr. Howard will send out units right away to your area. Kindly remain on the line. I took a seat in my study and began to check the security feeds on my computer that showed the cameras streaked with rain. I noticed two people walking toward my house. Brian appears anxious and uncertain as he staggers slightly behind him, most likely due to intoxication. Suzanne. The moment Brian pulled my back door open, I watched him struggle with the lock. All across the house, alarms went off on the security stream. I noticed Brian pause, his face displaying obvious panic. It was already too late when Suzanne turned to flee. In the distance, police sirens could be heard getting louder by the moment. After fixing my jacket, I got up and headed downstairs. It was a chaotic scene outside by the time I got to the front door. There, police cars were parked along the street, and bursts of red and blue light painted the night wet with rain. Both Brian and Suzanne were astonished as they were let out in handcuffs. Stepping outside into my porch to get out of the rain, I took in the view. Brian's angry face twisted as his gaze came straight to mine. You. He struggled against the cops restraining him and let out a scream. This was done by you. Everything was destroyed by you. I calmly met his stare. I had a little smile on my face. No, Brian, this is what you'd done to yourself. Suzanne and you, I did nothing more than sit back and watch as the cops forced Brian into a waiting police vehicle. My gaze shifted to Suzanne. She was completely drenched as she stood there, her eyes wide with shock at how far she had fallen. Raphael. Her voice hardly raised above a whisper as she spoke. I interrupted her by raising a hand. Keep it, Suzanne. It's finished. Everything is lost for you. I had a wave of finality as Suzanne was led away. It was completed. Suzanne and Brian were heading to prison. Their lives and reputations in ruins. I had got my retribution. I pivoted and made my way back to my abode. As the sound of sirens faded into the distance, I closed the door on the chaos outside. I made a silent toast to fresh starts and poured myself a glass. I pondered over the satisfying taste of justice rendered throughout the chilly months before life found its new rhythm. The local press had moved on from the dramatic break-in and subsequent arrests, but the aftershocks were still being felt by those who were involved. I was sitting in my new home office, a roomy space with lots of windows framing a neatly landscaped garden. The house was larger, more contemporary and unusual, a tangible symbol of my new beginning. I was looking over some company paperwork. My phone rang and it was Jerry's text message. Hello, Raph. Jenny is coming over for cocktails this evening. Are you in? I grinned as a sensation of warmth moved through my chest. Jenny was a pillar of strength at the worst of my divorce and its aftermath. Gradually, what had begun as friendship had developed into something more. Wouldn't overlook it. I responded to the text. Later that night, I was sitting across from Jerry and Jenny at our favorite bar. The laid-back vibe was a stark contrast to the tense months we'd all experienced. With her eyes sparkling, Jenny continued, So, Raphael, how is life in your new location? Considering, I took a sip of my beverage. It's excellent, excellent. It feels like, in fact, as if I can breathe once more. You are aware. Jerry gave a nod, his eyes full of understanding. Man, I understand. You merit some peace after what you've been through. Jenny continued, Speaking of which, her voice growing serious, what information have you heard about them? Without having to ask, I understood exactly who she meant. Brian and Suzanne, the masterminds of my suffering who are now paying for their misdeeds. In actuality, I already have. I remarked, putting my drink down. I received some intriguing news today. Jerry took a bending position. Curiosity got the better of her. Yes, that's right. Tell, please. I inhaled deeply and started to arrange my ideas. Yes, Brian is incarcerated. During the inquiry, several charges, an attempted burglary, an assault, and some financial crimes were discovered. It looks like he will be here for a while. All right, Jerry stated forcefully. Bastard is deserving of every moment. I agreed and nodded, then carried on. Regarding Suzanne, although she was spared jail time, her life is in disarray. She resides with Catherine, her cousin. Catherine doesn't seem to be very happy with the arrangement. After all Suzanne did, Jenny mused. I can only imagine. It surprises me that anyone would adopt her. It's not exactly a warm greeting from what I've heard. Catherine is treating her more like an unwanted house guest than a member of the family, I added. Suzanne is attempting to make ends meet by working a minimum pay job. We all listened in silence for a moment as this information registered. I was waiting for the twinge of regret, the ache of pity that I imagined would come upon learning of Suzanne's fate. However, it never materialized. Rather, I experienced no emotion, no happiness in her agony. Not sympathy, though. Simply put, a cool distance. "Raph, are you all right?" Jerry inquired, examining my face. I gave a nod. "I'm shocked to see that I'm in it. Yes, I am. It's peculiar. I guess I expected hearing about their demise to feel, well, more rewarding, but to be honest, I feel uninterested." Jenny grabbed my hand and reached across the table. "Raphael, that is a wonderful thing. It denotes your progression. Their issues and lives, they are no longer yours." I gave her hand back a squeeze, appreciating her understanding. "You're accurate. It's only, it's been such a long path," Jerry replied, raising his glass to long journeys and fresh starts. "And to your friends who support you no matter what." We shook glasses, and as we talked and laughed more, the atmosphere grew warm and friendly. A feeling of calm descended upon me. This was, I understood, what it really felt like to go on. I awoke the following morning to an unexpected email. My heart missed a beat at hearing the sender's name. Howard Suzanne. I briefly thought about marking it as unread, but my curiosity won out. The communication was lengthy and at times meandering. Suzanne expressed her sorrows in full, her awakening to the seriousness of her errors. She wrote about the challenges, setbacks, and everyday reminders of how far she had fallen in her new existence. She wrote, "I know I have no right to beg for your pardon. However, I must express my sincere regret for everything to you. I will always regret the lovely thing I ruined due to my greed and selfishness." I waited for the old anguish to rear its head and for the fury to return as I read her words. But once more I sensed simply a hushed kind of recognition. Though they passed over me, Suzanne's remarks did not actually impact me. Not any longer. I ended the email without sending a reply. We had run out of things to discuss. It was Suzanne's regrets to carry, the same way that I might live my new life. I ended up going to a get-together with several close friends later that week. Naturally, Jerry was there, as were Jenny and a few other people who had supported me throughout my lowest points. Not only was my divorce official, but we were also celebrating the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. Jerry lifted his glass to Raphael as we stood on the balcony, watching the sun set over the city. Speaking above the soft hum of the conversation, he said, "A man who overcame treachery to emerge stronger. You, buddy, demonstrated to us all what true strength looks like." His toast was repeated by the others, who looked warm and sincere in their adoration. Their support caused a lump to develop in my throat. I answered, my voice raspy with emotion. "Thank you. Each and every one of you. Without you, I would not have survived." Jenny put her hand in mine and squeezed it tenderly. "Raphael, the difficult part was done by you. As the celebration went on all around us, we simply encouraged you." Jenny and I managed to have some alone time. Her gaze swept across mine as she gazed up at me. "Raphael, how are you actually doing? With all of it?" I gave it some thought and tried to articulate how I felt. "I'm content. For the first time in a long time," I finally said. "I have the impression that I am right where I should be." With comprehension in her eyes, she grinned. "I'm happy. Raphael, you are deserving of happiness. True, long-lasting contentment." I felt a warmth course through my chest as I gazed at her. I had been fighting for this my entire life, not merely retribution, but also the opportunity for a better life. As the night wore on and the last of our friends said their farewells, the celebration came to an end. Jerry and I were alone ourselves on the balcony. He murmured, leaning against the railing, "Hell of a journey." I looked out over the city lights and nodded. "That's right, Jerry said again, his tone reflective. "I was concerned about you at the beginning of all of this. Thought you could become lost in the retaliation." I lifted an eyebrow as I turned to face him. "Still, you were there for me." He gave a shrug. "I consider you a buddy. I reasoned that if you went too far, I would be there to draw you back, or you would eventually work it out of your system." After pausing, he smiled and continued. Besides, those bastards were due. I laughed, and for the first time in months, I felt light. As Jerry departed, they fulfilled their promise to meet up shortly. I lingered out on the balcony a bit later. I pondered over all that had transpired, the treachery, the suffering, and the well-planned retaliation, and I understood that the rage that had propelled me had eventually burned itself out. Something else took its place, a quiet strength and a firm belief that I could handle everything life threw at me. I had overcome my darkest fear and emerged from it not merely alive, but also flourishing. I considered Brian languishing in a prison cell, Suzanne working her minimum wage job and living under her cousin's critical gaze. His haughtiness and bluster were taken away. I was not amused by their misery, nor was I sympathetic. Just as I had made my decisions, so had they. For my part, I had an entirely new existence in front of me. A life untroubled by feelings of hatred and betrayal. A life surrounded by devoted friends. And maybe even another chance to fall in love with Jenny. I turned to head back inside, grinning. It had been more than just destroying Brian and Suzanne as part of my wrath. It had been about taking back my own identity, about rising stronger and wiser from the ashes of betrayal. And I'd achieved more than I could have imagined in that regard. I felt like everything was coming to an end when I shut the balcony door. I had finished this chapter of my life, whatever followed. I was prepared for it. Not only had I defeated Suzanne and Brian, but also the hurt and resentment that had been threatening to overwhelm me. The future appeared brighter than ever before, and I was free. This is the following tale. It was my own wife who fired me. In one sentence, 9 years of devoted service were erased. I broke within and watched her, cold and calculated, from across the table. She remained still. I understood that evening that our marriage wasn't just over. It had been killed by want. Here's the twist, though. I was no longer just her worker. Her worst error was me. It's her turn now to see just how simple it is to lose everything. This goes beyond business. It is intimate. Hold on, how did you say that? In his wife's office, Dave stood. She was the division's leader, and much further down the corporate ladder was Dave, a menial accounts representative. Although he had been a little anxious when she initially started working with him, he believed that everything would work out because there were multiple levels of management between them. Perhaps not. Mr. Waxman, your numbers are drastically down. In your division, you are the lowest performer of the year. Sadly, we were left with no options. To take you to your office so you may get your belongings, Xavier is waiting outside. At work, they had always addressed each other as Mr. and Miss in order to maintain professionalism. Although she had chosen to use her married name for business purposes, everyone in the office was aware of their union. A picture of her even graced Dave's desk, showing her shaking the hand of the board chairman upon receiving her promotion. And that's it. I'm fired after 9 years of devoted work because my sales are declining. You would have known if you had listened to me. Please give up. The choice has already been made. Let's avoid adding unnecessary stress to this situation. It seemed humorous to him for some reason. Pink, pay attention. Miss Patterson, I really do mean it. She must have hit a button because Xavier, one of the security officers, materialized out of nowhere. Please take Mr. Waxman to his desk so he can gather his belongings, Xavier. I wish you well, Mr. Waxman. Maybe this may motivate you to put in more effort in your next role. Xavier appeared a little ashamed, but he needed to get his work done. Dave turned to face him and smiled. Come on, let's not make it more difficult than necessary, as she stated. When Dave left through the door, she was still speaking. He was informed that most of them had known ahead of time since they avoided making eye contact with him. That was clearly not lifting his spirits. He moved slowly and met the eyes of everybody who ventured to look at him. The women reddened as they averted their gaze. Packing a little box on his way out didn't take long because he didn't keep anything in his office. Xavier said something. Mr. Waxman, you overlooked this, Xavier stated, passing Dave the pricey set of pens and pencils she had given him the first time he won Salesman of the Year. After giving it a quick glance, Dave threw it and her photo in the trash. No, I didn't. Dave needed the work car returned, so Xavier drove him home. He tried talking for a while, but eventually he got the message and stopped as Dave stepped out of the car. Xavier extended his hand to shake his. Dave accepted it. realizing that Xavier was just going about his business. I apologize, dude. I apologize for how it transpired. Even though he didn't feel like smiling, Dave did. Also me. He surveyed the house as though it were his first time upon entering. He came to the realization that not much of him was there. She appeared to be gradually cutting him out at work as much as at home. He pondered whether he was to blame or whether this was simply another sign of their increasing separation. She returned home later than usual, at approximately 7. Dave didn't even look up from the baseball game he was watching. "Hello, my love. I apologize for being late. The meeting went beyond its time. You are aware of how much the board enjoys hearing their own voices." He remained silent, continued to watch the game. She stopped, then gave it another go. "Dinner? What's on the menu?" They'd always made dinner together, first whoever got home. However, after giving it some thought, Dave discovered that she had only made dinner a few times in the previous year, primarily due to his travels. "I've already eaten whatever you chose to make." She looked for a minute, then said something. "You must not be angry about today, right? It wasn't personal, it was just business. You know how brilliant you are, and I still care about you the same." Dave responded, "You really missed the point. Anger is erupting. Yes, I'm angry. You did a terrible job with it. Throughout the years I worked there, did I ever receive a negative review? Where were the conversations or warnings? You would have known why my numbers were down if you had paid attention to what I had to say. Give up pleading. Professionally, I'm sure I made the proper choice. That really got to him." He paused for a brief period of time. He cut her off as she was about to smile. "No, it wasn't handled professionally by you. You also seemed uninterested in what I had to say. Was Adler involved in this in any way?" She paused to stutter before responding. "He's been worried for several months. I was left with no option when the numbers fell. I had to demonstrate that you were fired if you didn't perform, regardless of who you were." Taking a deep breath, Dave attempted to center himself. "If you truly cared about me, either personally or professionally, you could have approached it in a different way. You and I would have spoken. You may have offered me the opportunity to step down. You have no idea how difficult it will be for me to find work again right now." He came to a halt, exhausted. More than before, there was a heavy quiet in the air. For a brief while, Dave observed the tension between them while sitting in silence. Why would anyone else give me a chance now if I can't even perform well enough for my own wife, someone who should have faith in me? I feel like you truly harmed me with your choice. After this, it will be difficult for me to find another employment." He hesitated, considering what to say. "I believe it would be better if we ended this conversation before one of us said anything we later regretted. How about you grab some food while I wrap up the game?" She gave it another go. "I had no idea you would react this way. Dave, it's simply business. We'll be all right. Also, don't stress over a job. I provide plenty for us both to eat." Dave gave her a stop signal with his uplifted hand. "Please refrain from, you would probably want to make me a house husband. That would undoubtedly enhance your reputation as a capable executive." "Well, that isn't going to occur. I'll work somewhere else again." At last, her patience ran out. "All right. If it makes you feel better, keep being furious. Maybe it will inspire you to perform better in the future." She gave him a fierce look. "For the record, I'm calling off any plans I had for a pleasant evening. It appears that you will be alone for some while." He gave a shrug. "That's all right. I won't lose my job over it, at least." That one hurt. After fumbling to answer, she eventually stormed out of the room. He heard her upstairs a little later, clattering plates in the kitchen. She came back, still dressed in her old sweatpants and tee, clearly expressing her displeasure. Dave remained silent, and it took her till she broke the spell. "I apologize." "All right. I gave it a lot of thinking before deciding on it. It's not the end of the world, and I do care about you. We can put an end to our discussion about it." Dave cut the other off. "The done is the done. I'm heading to bed. Tomorrow is when I have to start seeking for work. Good luck with your evening." Her words were at a loss, but eventually they came. "I will shortly be awake." She cried out when she eventually made it upstairs. His belongings were gone from the room, something she had missed the first time. He'd moved into the guest room, which had its own bathroom, preparing to spend some time there. Before long, she was pounding on the door and begging to be let inside. Ignoring her, Dave wondered how she would take it when she found out he'd changed the lock. After a few minutes, he heard the lock rattling, followed by a sigh and an abrupt silence. As she had done for years, Beverly's assistant, Jen, brought her boss coffee and a pastry the following morning. Since Beverly's first promotion, Jen had been by her side, always telling it how it was. As usual, they sat down together and drank coffee. "When you went home, how did it go?" Jen, inquiring. Beverly gave a sigh. "Not very well. He was enraged, said things that I didn't think he would. He even changed the lock and moved out of the bedroom. I can't believe he tossed out my picture and the pen set I gave him. Why is he having such a hard time?" Jen cast a worried glance at her supervisor. "I told you to be careful. You need to have approached it more carefully. Your delivery struck me as being quite chilly. There was nothing for me to do. I had something to say. If someone doesn't live up to the standards, nobody is untouchable." "How did the other employees in the office react, to be honest?" Jen inquiring. "Always. Okay, it is split. There are men and women who feel that you were too severe. Some people respect you, but not many. Some individuals are revising their resumes to indicate that they would prefer not to work for an organization that fires employees without cause. There are 2 salespeople who intend to depart. One has an interview scheduled in advance." Beverly just stared, shocked. She didn't mean for this to happen. Being firm would, in her opinion, motivate individuals to work harder rather than drive them away. She was planning something major, perhaps even a spot on the board in the future, and all of this might be ruined. Jen pulled her back into the present. "Regarding your spouse, what steps will you take?" Beverly dismissed it with a wave. "Remaining committed to my work. I'll wait for a little. He cherishes me. He'll change his mind." Jen didn't say anything despite her doubts. She had spent years being devoted to Beverly, but in case circumstances at work worsened, she needed a fallback. She needed to consider her own family. For the next 3 weeks, Dave's condition worsened. He stopped eating healthily, stopped going to the gym, and spent more time depressed than productive. He left a mess everywhere he went and didn't really contribute anything around the house. Bev took his acerbic remarks in stride at first, trying to be encouraging until she finally stopped talking. She saw that he appeared to be more at ease and valued at work, where he appeared to spend a significant amount of time. Then he had a spell of not washing himself. 3 days in, Bev was at her breaking point. "Dave, please, it's imperative that you look after yourself. It appears that you are unaware of how much it annoys me." "I apologize for my response. I could have acted in a different manner." Her voice grew softer. "I long for the previous version of you. I miss having you around me. It has nearly been a month. Why is it that we are unable to return to the past?" Dave shrugged and held up his hand. "I've been working quite a bit lately. I'm appreciated by everyone there, and I've never had a problem. Additionally, it seems as though you've already given your job your all." Her complexion turned red. "You can't mean business. Never once have I betrayed you. Yet circumstances have been difficult. My loyalty has never wavered. Yes, I have received offers, but I have declined them because of you. We'll discuss that further later. However, you are aware that you have put your career ahead of our relationship from the beginning. We lost out on a lot of memorable moments together because your work always came first. How frequently are you with your family? We've lost contact with a great number of friends. What if we were parents? Because you were never home, they believe they were raised by a single parent." Observing her expression, Dave briefly felt sympathy, but it vanished when she struck him angrily. For a long time, the sting remained on his cheek. "You believe I can handle this easily? I'm putting a lot of effort into our future so that we may both enjoy retirement. We decided not to have children, but I acknowledged my mistakes. It simply wouldn't work with our schedule. I would never betray you, you know that. You should try to tidy up and come spend some time with me." She took a moment to collect herself. He smiled sadly at her. "I apologize, but I'm not in the mood for supper or talking about kids because I've already eaten." Even though it was difficult to see other people with their families, I believed it was best to keep things simple in our lives. But you're correct. I have to get over my self-pitying. I'm going to take a shower and make an effort to reconnect with who I am. Perhaps I should exercise more. I must shift my attention. Stunned by the words and her own response, She stood there. She apologized profusely and was obviously sorry when he came back downstairs. I handled this poorly. It shouldn't take one difficult business choice to destroy our relationship. I promise that I still think highly of you. He let out a sigh. I understand you believe you made the right decision, but it was simply too much to fire me. I'm sick of feeling like your career has always come first in my eyes. I hope you get the fulfillment you're looking for. But keep in mind, in order to get there, you had to let go of a lot. He stopped and gave her a glance. Are you finding it difficult because of how you handled me or because people are moving on? At work, you've established a difficult atmosphere. It's detrimental to everyone. Speaking with our mutual friends, I've heard that things have changed. I promise not to criticize you. I only realize that it's changing the perception of you among others, Dave went on in silence. It's going to become tougher before it gets better, which is something I shouldn't say. Now I have to concentrate on the gym. Thoughts of their talk and the impact of their comments on her weighed heavily as Bev lay in bed. I loved you so much then, he said. As she dozed off, she couldn't help but wonder if he still had the same feelings. Beverly was sitting with Jen 3 days later, sharing her worries. Simply put, I'm at a loss on what to do. I feel like he turns against me with everything I say. I believe he has carried these emotions inside for a long time without expressing them. I haven't received any affection from him in about 8 weeks. To better control my emotions, I even had to purchase a personal device. I would be going a bit crazy otherwise. It's unbelievable that he declined the employment offer that I diligently sought to secure for him. He simply exploded when he came here when you were out conducting errands. Thank goodness, not many people were around because it was lunchtime. When you were merely attempting to assist, why did he react with such venom? Jen inquiring. In exchange for the president helping out Dave, I offered to give him a portion of our company. Before his frank assessment at the previous meeting, everything was going smoothly. I had to make some accommodations because the work was merely a favor for me. He warned Dave that he would face the most challenging assignments and that he would not make it through the probationary period if he did not show progress right away. He made it plain that my years of assistance did not guarantee their indulgence. Then what did they do? He got up, said thank you to the man for the chance, and came right over here. The president, incensed that Dave had simply left, called me immediately thereafter. He urged that I keep my end of the bargain. Before the receptionist called to report that a guy had arrived to see Beverly without an appointment, they had moved the topic of conversation to general business topics. It's urgent, he claims, and it will be done in 5 minutes. Beverly brought him into her office out of curiosity. He was a tall, well-groomed man in a suit and tie who had a kind look. He immediately went to the point after thanking her for her time. Beverly Patterson, please. Should I address you as Mrs. David Waxman instead? For work, I go by my maiden name. In what way may I help you now? As he gave her the paperwork, he had a sincere expression of regret. I apologize, but you've had your meal, ma'am. I hope you have a pleasant day. Before heading off, he said. Beverly felt dizzy as she studied the enormous packet. She woke up on her sofa, her ex and Jen curled up next to her. Jen was using a cool cloth to gently dab at her forehead. What took place? She inquired. You passed out. I passed out. Why would I pass out? Jen raised the packet and all suddenly returned. Beverly started to cry. She needed a moment to gather herself before asking Jen to open it and provide her with the information. Jen took it open. She read the excellent news, Beverly, that he isn't divorcing, and her expression changed accordingly. Jen raised a hand, but Beverly's mood brightened. But he's suing the business. Bob Adler, you, and the board chairman for unjust termination and psychological suffering. You must speak with him right now and persuade him to give up on this. Alternatively, it can destroy your career in this place. It makes no difference if he prevails or fails. There will be a ton of negative press. Your future opportunities will be severely limited, even if you manage to keep your job. Beverly fainted again, but this time she pulled herself together and hurried home in the hopes of getting there in time. She discovered a message on the dining table. Miss Patterson, I apologize, but you went too far. It's a compelling case, in my attorney's opinion, and your board will stop at nothing to maintain it that way. She got agitated when I told her that I was going to make this public and that I wouldn't take any agreements. For now, I'm moving out. I still think about you, though. even though I'm not really sure why. If you're willing, after all of this, we may attend counseling together. Maybe we can make our way back to each other. I'm excited about my new job that I found, by the way. We'll speak soon." Feeling as though her work and life were falling apart, Beverly reclined in her kitchen chair, right when she believed things couldn't get much worse. Yes, it did. After 2 weeks, things appeared dire because there was a hearing in 4 days. The board had consulted with a lawyer and an impartial HR specialist, and employee feedback did not support her position. She was deep in contemplation. She had always liked Bob Adler and had been pleased to have him on board until Bob suddenly rushed into the room. Bob had been Beverly's rock after she fired Dave. One supper escalated into too much wine for her because she was depressed and alone. It was comfortable when he kissed her, but she remembered to stop him. Even as he tried to talk her into giving it another go, she had distanced herself from him and expressed her regret. "Beverly, you must move quickly." Solomon Enterprises informed me via phone that they would not be signing the agreement. That's an 18% loss on our business. All they said was that they had located a less expensive supplier whose quality was on par with or better than ours. They're open to hearing from us the next year, but it will take something very exceptional to get them to reconsider, if it's insufficient. Stewart Industries and Apex have both hinted that they might look into other possibilities. That adds up to 8% more. That was the last thing Beverly wanted to hear. For her and Adler and maybe others, losing a quarter of their firm might be disastrous, especially while they were handling the wrongful termination lawsuit. She had to move quickly. When Bob began requesting another date, she turned him away, telling him it felt good to be apart now. Although Beverly was no longer convinced that she wanted to stay married, dating Bob would undoubtedly cause problems if Dave found out. She took the phone up. "Good day, Mr. Solomon. I appreciate you answering my call. Thank you very much, Beverly. Furthermore, how many times have I requested for Sal to be my name? I hope that by now we are buddies. Indeed we are. Sal. Kindly send Susan my compliments. I've also heard that your daughter recently received her MBA from Wharton. Will she represent Solomon Enterprises in the future?" He chuckled. "I really hope so. I've never been as smart as she already is. She has 3 years from me. After that, Susan and I intend to set sail into the twilight. Sal, it sounds really nice. You must be aware of the reason I'm calling. Indeed. Beverly, I hate to inform you, but our new supplier is more affordable, faster, and up to our requirements of quality. I can't ignore the difference since it's so great. Have you yet to sign the contracts?" "Not quite, but we're planning to complete the documentation in 2 weeks. All right, Sal, please, let me try to match or surpass their offer. Only one gathering. All I ask is that." He let out a sigh. "Fine. I'll give you one chance just to be nice. I'll be there once it's set up." After talking with Sal, Beverly felt optimistic about regaining the business, so she set her concerns aside and concentrated on the impending hearing. Dave was disoriented and in danger of losing his mind. He understood that he would probably have to move at the gym in order to expand his search area if he was going to find anything in his field of work. He exerted much effort on himself, questioning whether his marriage had any more hope. He knew that during the past year he had become distant, but Beverly had never let him express his feelings. She was unaware that he had purposefully dropped orders, even though his primary clientele appeared to be content with it. He ran into Sal Solomon and his wife Susan after leaving the gym, which caught him off guard. Dave had known Sal for 8 years, having been one of his initial clients. Dave felt like family once they got past the normal salesman-customer dynamic. He once said to Susan in jest that he wishes he had been as intelligent as she was when he was younger. Their relationship was cemented when Dave called her his favorite aunt. Sal would grin at Susan's appeal as she laughed and drooled. "Sal, what a surprise, Susan. It's wonderful to meet you. Are you visiting the area for work? Happily, I can say it's all pleasure. We recently left the theater. I've wanted to see The Odd Couple for ages. Furthermore, this is supposedly the greatest touring rendition available. We couldn't resist coming when we learned they would be here, but otherwise wouldn't." One day, Sal told Dave that his business was merely a means to an end. Making Susan happy was his major responsibility, and he grinned. He made sure his staff members benefited from his goodwill by never forgetting their birthdays or anniversaries. To honor their wedding anniversaries, he gave them a half-day off on their anniversary, fully compensated so they could enjoy the lowest turnover in his office and factories in the state. Someone has to move or take a job opportunity. On their birthdays, men received gifts that matched their hobbies, while women received roses and chocolates. It could have been a box of golf balls, a brand new fishing pole, or premium cigars. Executives would frequently stop by his company to see how it was run. Some adopted his procedures, but most made no changes at all. Dave was forced to accompany them, and for 90 minutes he forgot his problems and appreciated their sincere bond. But eventually, they mentioned Dave's predicament. Sal was a little miffed, and Susan was perplexed. Among her best was you. It's really beyond my comprehension. Did she not understand your logic? Sal, she never gave me an opportunity to clarify. She just let me go in a very noticeable way. It has damaged my standing in the community. It appears that I will be moving shortly. Susan raised her voice. Is Beverly aware that you're thinking about this? Does she want to accompany you? No, she is still unaware. And she was not going to quit her work. Susan. I think she's never been unfaithful, before you ask. In a physical sense, anyway. No. Her work is her actual passion. It also gives her access to things I could never match. Sal hesitated, then grinned. Come see me in a few days, my boy, as you're at a crossroads. I might be able to assist. Has nothing more worthwhile to accomplish. 3 days later, Dave was in his office. After a few moments of discussing general business, Sal posed what appeared to be a casual query. Have you heard of this group? Dave was aware of them. They were a brand new South Korean business attempting to enter the U.S. market. While waiting on a delayed flight at an airport, he had met the owner's youngest son. They learned about each other's careers, and he was happy to show Dave some of his merchandise. Dave understood that his company would face direct competition from them, but regrettably their attention was directed towards the West Coast. The young man was friendly, though far from his area of expertise. Since they frequently found themselves in the same towns, his father sent him to the United States to network with a group of people who were equally unfamiliar with American customs. Dave started acting as Sal's mentor. But when Sal moved to the Midwest and was based in Chicago, Dave lost contact with him. Dave was somewhat relieved. His goods were of excellent quality, and they cost a lot less than what Beverly and Dave were paid to represent the company. Sal was serious when he asked about other companies, and Dave saw it. With a smile, he acknowledged that he was aware of them. Actually, I was pals with the owner's youngest son, even though our last conversation was more than a year ago. Sal seems a little hesitant. They're getting closer to us. Several of the customers I've spoken with are happy that they used their products. I mostly didn't reply to them because of you. Your things might cost more, but you've always fulfilled your promises. Delivered on schedule and took care of any problems we had. After you showed off the most recent version, Stuart and a few others took your suggestion, and we have been updating our equipment, using up old stock, for the past year or so. Before I'm completely transitioned, I have about a month's supply remaining. I don't know about the others. Actually, the version from your company fits our plans more closely than the previous one did. I expected you to come by primarily to ask for your advice and suggest a job rather than pitch. Why not give purchasing a try? My buying manager is leaving, and we haven't yet located a worthy successor. Vendors would be wise to their mistakes and reconsider trying to take advantage of you given your sales experience. Additionally, the back and forth in negotiations would be reduced because many people know you or your reputation. What did you make before to being fired? I want to know about your best year, not how much you make now. Startled? Dave gave away his prior profits. That is not a problem. In fact, I could probably provide you bonuses for savings and performance in addition to an additional $5,000 to $10,000. Even if it doesn't work out or you realize it's not for you, why not give it a shot? A resume that highlights your experience on both the corporate and personal fronts will undoubtedly be improved. In the end, Dave chose to seize the chance. For the first time since leaving his work, he had a glimmer of enthusiasm, and it was preferable than moving away. He went back to his flat and was really happy to be there. Actually, his former house was more of a representation of her prosperity. Frequently, she would subtly remind him that they could not have afforded it if their earnings had been equal. Dave sighed as he considered the impending hearing. He questioned how much of his actions were driven by a desire for retroactive action and how much by a desire for justice, most likely half of each. He realized that even though Beverly would keep her job, her career would be in danger if he prevailed. She would not advance in the organization any farther. Conversely, though, should he lose, it would take years for the consequences to wear off. Should he establish that he was correct? Would that satisfy you? Most likely. Would he like seeing her career take a hit? That he might, he told himself. Just a tiny bit. He did this, not out of malice, but because he thought she should learn how to treat people with respect and that the world wasn't only about her. Reminiscing about their initial meeting, he remembered her as a driven young lady with well-defined objectives and formidable skills. He still clearly recalled their special dinner at a place they typically couldn't afford to celebrate her first promotion when she wavered. Reminding her that their efforts were appreciated, he presented her his first bonus check. He thought back to their love and the happiness of two young people who felt unstoppable. He also recalled that moment they slept together following the celebration, her head resting on his chest as he played softly with her hair, and he felt that life would only get better from there. In actuality, nothing got better. She appeared to be pushed farther away with every promotion. Her clothes become more expensive. Professionals would groom her appearance, and she would get agitated if he tried to express love for her before an event. He stopped going to social gatherings because he was tired of always trying to be the center of attention and felt more and more abandoned, with the exception of the most important ones. Beverly was irritated, at first thinking it conveyed the incorrect message, then spinning it into a story about how she thought it was her idea to draw attention to herself. Beverly was walking to the local state employment office conference room today, and it was a momentous occasion. Her professional path would be determined by the negotiations' result. Having not seen her spouse for about 3 weeks, she observed the changes in him. His distinctive appearance came from having let his hair grow, dropped some weight, and sporting a well-groomed beard. Standing next to him was a smartly dressed labor lawyer called Amanda Austin, who was well known for her skill. Amanda's main purpose for being there was to watch and gather data for the eventual litigation. Beverly was well represented by the greatest agent her firm could provide. After spending some time coaching her on how to handle the anticipated queries, he encouraged her to voice her confusion about the circumstances, even though all she had done was behave in the best interests of the organization. She questioned him about their prospects. There are issues with this case. There are no warnings, no performance evaluations, no paperwork, and no obvious repercussions for his lack of progress. His recent review had a great response. According to corporate policies, his boss was supposed to handle the termination while an HR representative served as a witness. Since you fired him before giving him the chance to appeal the decision to a higher authority, that higher authority would have been you. You've broken business policy once more. Before I came, I checked your records, and you had great ratings. You were well regarded by the board and the home office. And yet, here you are. Erring. Someone who is new to the area would strive to stay away. I'll try to be of assistance. However, we are powerless to stop him if he chooses to aggravate the situation. Have you recently had any conversations with him? Does he realize how this can affect your career negatively? His scowl got deeper when Beverly had to admit that she hadn't talked to him recently. He probably knew what would happen if things got out of hand. After everyone had taken a seat, the arbiter started the meeting. Everything was set to be recorded by a video camera. She identified herself as the State Employment Commission's arbitrator and said that any agreement would not be legally valid unless it was recorded and notarized. She added that they could take it to the Capitol or, if needed, court, if an agreement could not be reached or if any party disagreed with her judgment. Before letting anyone else speak, she first thanked the HR representative for sending her a copy of the company's termination policy, which helped her comprehend their procedures. She posed several queries. Miss Patterson? Mr. Waxman? I take it you're married. Is that accurate? Beverly nodded, and Dave did nothing more than nod. Could you tell me how this has affected your marriage, Miss Patterson? Is your husband acting in a reasonable manner in this situation? Before we move on, let me make this clear. Beverly started speaking when Dave remained silent. Yes, we are married, and there is no doubt that this circumstance has impacted our bond. We're here now. He moved out and hasn't spoken to me since. I've made it clear several times that my choice had nothing to do with our personal lives and was solely business-related. To be honest, I have no idea why he is acting in this manner. It was hard for the arbiter to understand how this wouldn't affect their marriage, she thought to herself. After 9 years, the corporation fired him and sent him home, telling him he was no longer valuable. How was he not angry? She looked across to Dave. "Would you like to give your viewpoint, Mr. Waxman, ma'am?" "I'm here to talk about the merits of my wrongful termination complaint, not my personal life, per my lawyer's recommendation." "That's reasonable. Please provide a detailed account of the events leading up to Miss Patterson's decision to fire Mr. Waxman." Beverly described how Bob Adler, his supervisor, had come up to talk to her about Mr. Waxman's underwhelming sales results for the previous year. She said that she had no idea how bad his stats had gotten. However, following a lengthy conversation with his management, they decided he needed to be let go. She went on to say that it was the most difficult decision she had ever made in business, but she had to put the needs of the firm first. When no paperwork was produced, the arbiter scowled and requested for more. "If this employee's sales started to fall after an 8-year streak of success, Miss Patterson, wouldn't you have been inquisitive enough to look into why, after all this time, as a decent employee, doesn't he deserve an opportunity to do better, maybe during a probationary period when the expectations would be made clear? Such a procedure is outlined for employees with at least 5 years of service in the corporate manual you provided, which I received via email from your HR department." Beverly wriggled a little and gave her prepared answer. "It is accurate. However, I have the power to fire anyone at any time as CEO. I was afraid for certain long-standing accounts because of the sharp decline in numbers, and that's exactly what was going on. I believed I was powerless." After giving a nod, the arbitrator turned to face Dave. "Do you think that makes sense, sir?" Dave gave a small smile. "Not at all. My stats decreased for a reason. Miss Patterson told me to keep out of topics outside of my role, even though I tried to explain that to her at work and in our personal lives. I decided to let it go. Could you explain why there was such a large decline in your sales figures? It was done on purpose. In addition to clearing out our outdated inventory, we were getting ready to introduce a new product. I gave discounts on the previous inventory to entice buyers to purchase the new item. 4 clients have given me statements attesting to this tactic. They plan to order the new goods in quantity once the old inventory hit a particular threshold. It was advantageous to all parties concerned. Yes, I did have some fun times, like when I played golf and had dinners with clients to talk about upcoming business. However, I always considered what was best for the organization. My immediate manager was aware of everything. How come he's not here? I made a special request for him. Mr. Waxman, this isn't a court of law. I am not allowed to make someone come to an unofficial hearing. Do you have any proof to back up your statements?" Amanda Austin took many documents out of her briefcase, delivering them to the mediator. She glanced over them, looking concerned. She told the corporate attorney that this was not a courtroom when he tried to step in. He consented, but only after demanding to see the paperwork when she was finished. His expression grew graver as she went on. They argued back and forth until the arbitrator stepped in. Amanda sighed deeply and reclined in her chair. "I've had enough. Miss Patterson, you broke business policy when you fired him. Put another way, you did not adhere to due process. I come to the conclusion that Mr. Waxman was fired without cause or a chance to exercise his legal rights as stipulated by business policy. For this reason, I'm giving you the order to pay him his income from the time of his dismissal until today and to reinstate him without any penalties. You may both contest this decision in the Capitol, where it will be handled as a formal legal case, if you so want. Are there any people who object?" Beverly shook her head, discouraged. Dave raised his voice. "I'll take the overpayment. I'm grateful. I also intend to leave the company. It seems like a challenging environment for me. In addition, I like my new job." Beverly knew how serious things were. It was probably the end of her career, and she was lucky to still be employed by the corporation. Dave's attorney met with hers following the hearing, and upon his return, he appeared worried. Back at the workplace, they convened in a conference room where he laid out the circumstances. The hearing went just as I had expected. "Make sure he gets that money as soon as possible," Amanda told me. "They intend to sue the corporation, Mr. Adler, you and us all. I suggested that she schedule a time for us to get settled, but your husband wants to go to court and is not willing to settle, making it known to the general public. This might discourage talented people from applying to work for us. I'm not sure what to do next. Usually, to resolve the issue, we would submit a settlement offer. That wouldn't cut it in this case because the issue isn't only financial. Talking to your husband right away will help you come up with a workable solution. If I knew how to get in touch with him, sir, I would do it. After changing his phone number, he left. No common friend of ours has seen or heard of him. He mumbled something about a new job, which surprised me. It's a tiny space here. If he had another job, I should have known. I'll make quick contact with some of his buddies, but I can't promise they'll help. He promised to come back shortly with the documents. Jen tried to cheer Beverly up by taking her out to lunch, but it didn't work. With a deft move, Jen brought up their impending trip to Solomon Industries. You've always been liked by the owner, Bev. Win him over and reassert your authority over him. As much as he appreciates you, just a heads up. He does not like Adler. It's often recognized that if you're not sure why, Adler could have caused Dave a great deal of distress if he hadn't been defending you. Beverly was overpowered. She wondered why she hadn't known about these dynamics in her role as CEO. When Dave talked about his employment, a tiny voice told her that she ought to have paid closer attention. She had been undervaluing his job for a while, and after some quiet thought, she found it difficult to understand why Dave had been successful. But what that win signified, he wondered. He'd made a big impression on the woman he was meant to be helping. Regarding her work and future in the company, she was uncertain. Was he happy with how things turned out? Not particularly. He saw how proud she was to share her title and how committed she was to her work. But he experienced a feeling of approval. This was a situation that she had caused for herself. Although what she did was not as bad as what she could have done to an ordinary employee, her attitude would have eventually caused problems for someone else. Maybe she would learn an important lesson from this in the future. With that chapter of their life behind them, Dave questioned whether they would be able to go on and be together. He was aware that he could never return to the previous partnership. Either all would have to be equal or none at all. He was resolved not to move into the big mansion she shared with her, a tragic tribute to her accomplishment, in his opinion. A lovely family house is what it would have become. The money was one thing he was looking forward to. The back pay was substantial, nearly 5 months' worth. Amanda reminded him that living well was the finest kind of retaliation and advised him to settle rather than drag out the legal dispute. They had sued the business for $2 million. She also expected that, in order to avoid making the headlines, they would likely provide 20%. She learned that the business was joining forces with a rival and that this might have a long-term detrimental impact on their value. Although it wouldn't affect anything right now, firing Beverly might improve their reputation. Dave was content in his new community. It moved at a slower rate and was half the size of the city he had left. He couldn't have wished for a finer workplace. Everyone was kind. The best part was that he could buy a lot larger house for less money than he would have had to pay back home because the housing market was a little less active. He tossed the idea off with a smirk. What did home actually mean these days? He was unsure. Even a property that had been up for sale for almost a year caught Dave's attention. A large, 2-story older home sitting on 6 acres of property. Though owning it looked like a nice notion, he didn't really need that much space. He felt he could get a terrific deal, and the owners were keen to sell. After researching it online, he discovered that it was largely in fine shape. Apart from the roof itself, which was 20 years old but still worked, he planned to replace the shingles with metal roofing. He had pleasant memories of spending summer evenings at his grandparents' farm and drifting off to sleep to the sound of rain pattering on the roof. Dave had an uncommon dream that night. He didn't dream much or remember dreams very often, but this one showed him seated next to a woman on the front porch of the house. They watched from a glider, rocking softly. 2 giant and 1 small dog accompany the 3 kids as they play with a ball, a boy and 2 girls. Sitting on the railing was a huge calico cat that seemed to be a little indifferent to a little warmth. He turned to give his companion a loving gesture only to find that she was faceless. Startled awake, he lay still, wondering what the dream meant. With a sigh, he woke up and made the decision to work out before work. The day was going to be hectic. That night, Beverly had trouble falling asleep, and when she got ready for the day, she saw that she had bags under her eyes. She hoped it was only work-related stress, but in case it was more serious, she knew where to get support to be successful in her career. Looks were quite important, and it was crucial to appear young but experienced. She was kind of excited about the impending task. After investigating Bob, their attorney presented some unsettling information. It appeared like Bob was negotiating to replace her at the firm they were merging with. When the contracts were eventually relaxed, the company's directive was very explicit: make adjustments right away. However, Beverly was ready this time. Angela, a corporate HR representative, and Jack, their attorney, would accompany her to make sure everything went as planned. She was a little annoyed that she needed them there. Even though she could handle the matter just well on her own, recent events had shown that it may be helpful. She didn't feel the need to sugarcoat the reality by that point, and Bob was taken aback that he wouldn't be joining her to meet Sal. "Bob, Sal doesn't like you. It wouldn't help if I brought you along. I'm trying to win him back." He looked surprised, then became irate. "Ignore him." "Beverly, we aren't all that interested in his business. Do you still need my reminder to act professionally? Let's get over the fact that I was never your baby. If you believe that a sizable portion of our revenues are lost, then nothing. Perhaps this is not the right role for you. I initially assumed that you were unhappy upon hearing the news. While I'm gone, give that some thought. Recall that we must get together once I get back. Thus, maintain an open schedule. I'll give you a call when I return." As she walked out, she liked his look of shock, anticipating its appearance when the news breaks later. She concentrated on completing her presentation for Sal and his new buying manager as she drove. Sal was waiting at the restaurant, knowing it had to be flawless if she was going to have any chance of succeeding, notwithstanding Beverly's 15-minute early arrival. She was pleased with his cordial greeting and his seating arrangement. Thanks to a relative who taught him that manners never go out of style, Dave had always been well-mannered. Those were among the things she missed. He held out a hand as they engaged in small conversation before she turned to business. "Beverly, my purchasing director, should arrive soon. I want his opinion on everything we talk about. He ought to arrive shortly. Here he is at this moment." Bev turned to say hello, but the words stuck in her mouth. Dave was the one. The new buying director was him. If she had previously felt that she was facing a task, it was now far greater. His gentle words betrayed the concern she could see in his eyes. "Hi there, Beverly. Whoa, you look nicely put together. It's been a long time since I saw the dress. You always look fantastic in it, too." Unsure of how to reply, Beverly changed the subject. "In arbitration, you mentioned this position, thus, this is it. Right now, you're making a purchase for a salesman who probably feels like switching sides." He grinned. "Although there are difficulties, the goal is still sales, just approached from a different perspective. I also like watching the looks on salespeople's faces when they find out who I am. It totally modifies their strategy. Nothing surprises me because I've been in their position. In actuality, it facilitates negotiations. They cut directly to the chase since they know I'm knowledgeable. But first, let's eat lunch and then get down to work." Beverly found it strange to be sitting there eating with her husband, especially since she knew he was a powerful man. She wondered whether that was how he felt all the time. After dessert, she started her pitch while sipping coffee. She emphasized their established business partnership, discussed how effectively they had suited Sal's demands and how they could do so going forward. Sal was appreciative that Dave allowed her take the initiative. Sal paid close attention, but midway through, he cut her off. "All of what you've mentioned is accurate, Beverly, but we also need to keep in mind the person who initially brought us together and has consistently given us excellent service. I had indeed signed a verbal agreement with your salesperson, but I thought that it was no longer valid once he left the company, and yes, I was in the middle of buying supplies when everything changed. To be honest, South Korea offers a superior quality at a very attractive price. It more fully satisfies our demands than yours. My buying agent is familiar with and has faith in the owner's son. With whom are you going to replace Dave?" "Adler. Not in my opinion. He's never really appealed to me, not to mention that I've never trusted him. I would have insisted on having a separate representation even if we had kept working together." With a stern look, he stood over her. Even though I wasn't always in agreement with your approaches, Beverly, I always valued our relationship. If that's what you want, I'm still your friend. Professionally, though, we're through. I'm heading out because I have another meeting. If you'd want, you can still talk about this with my purchasing agent. Wishing you luck." With a small smile, he bent over and caressed her cheek. He said, "He cares for you still. Rebuilding that trust, though, will take time. Try your hardest." Was Dave happy with his lunch? Indeed, in a number of ways. Did he enjoy making her uncomfortable? Just a tiny bit. It was satisfying to watch her appear disoriented and bewildered rather than the assured individual she normally presented. She gave him a somber glance. "Surely we have no chance. Are you inquiring about our personal or professional relationship?" "No. If it's business-related, their product is readily available, less expensive, and it outperforms yours in practically every aspect. We would have lost customers quickly even if I had stayed on staff. You must collaborate with business to reconsider your approach. Perhaps think about the adjustments I recommended a year ago. Revise your procedures and incorporate development and research. You must change now to avoid becoming outdated." Dave saw the look of confusion on her face and recognized that she was forgetting the counsel he had given her months before. Though not an expert, he was able to recognize the symptoms. Overconfidence can sometimes backfire. For a short while, they sat in silence. She said softly, "Dave, may I ask you about us?" He was about to chuckle, but stopped himself. Rather, he asked softly, "What do you mean by us? Me and you, my dear. Kindly think about returning home so that we can rebuild our former relationship. You are missed." Her abrupt reply took him by surprise. "How come? Us? We haven't existed for nearly 3 years. I attended your gatherings as a mere presence. Someone to return home to. That's all, though. I seem to be more of a supporting role in your life. Our former intimacy vanished a long time ago. Beverly and I don't think that will alter. Yes, we did share some intimate moments, but how frequently did I start them? During the previous 2 years? Never. I didn't feel valued. I felt used. Don't act any different. You'll see that I'm correct if you give it some thought." Although he could see contradictory emotions on her face, he experienced a sudden wave of honesty and felt ready to share things he had been holding within for years. "I promise that no matter what happens, I will never again step foot in that house when I return home. I'd never felt at home there. It served as evidence of your accomplishments, and you fought against any adjustments I suggested. Right now, I'm looking at somewhere else, a home that I feel comfortable in. It's a 2-story older home with lots of room and land. Most importantly, it includes space for a garden I've always wanted to build and a workshop I've wanted for years. I apologize, but I've come to value my own path too much after spending so much time in your shadow. What does that leave us with?" He softened his response to her query, which was full of sorrow. "Sincerely, I have no idea. I worry that we may never be able to reconcile as a couple. Any relationship needs respect, and I haven't felt it from you in a long time, either at work or in general. I want to be a player in the background no more. I wish to be the protagonist of my own tale. I now acknowledge that I am somewhat to blame for our current circumstances. However, I loved you enough to accept reality as it was. I gave, but my generosity just made me want to give more, until I thought I was at my very end. I think, deep down, that's when you started to think less of me. You were able to diminish my influence in your life to the extent that it was nearly non-existent. You shouldn't have any trouble with it. Simply carry on as you have. I'll soon be nothing more than a hazy recollection." He got up and touched her shoulder. "Go back to your passions, Bev, your output, and now for some guidance. Avoid being around Adler. I don't know how he got you to see me in a different light, but consider that for a second. How could he hope to sow strife amongst us? Try not to worry too much. You've worked too long and well for this circumstance to really harm your career. Even though you might suffer a little, the company still values you. Beverly, goodbye." He hesitated a few seconds and turned to walk away. "Beverly, I apologize that our companies had to split ways, but it's simply business." She winced, and he questioned whether she got what he was saying. It was a perfect echo of the phrases she'd used to let him go. Beverly needed time to think things out. Thus, she went to a park in the area. While heading into town, she had seen. After parking, she looked over her life and located a bench. There were times when she was incredibly satisfied. She thought back to every promotion she had received and the work she had done to earn them, eagerly following her every move until she became the pinnacle of her industry. She felt worried about other memories. She thought of birthdays and significant events in their friends' and family's lives, as well as anniversaries she had missed and vowed to make up to Dave, all ignored as she concentrated on the upcoming transaction. She remembered the fleeting grief in Dave's eyes when a small child ran to embrace him. She thought for a second that their child was coming to him. She dismissed that idea. It didn't seem possible that Dave would agree to stay at home with the kids full-time. She had witnessed gifted women being neglected in their professions because their home obligations prevented them from giving their all. Besides, she believed her time was running out at 36. She was startled into sitting up by a realization. Dave was accurate. As long as she continued down her current path, he would always be the least important thing in her life. It seemed like she was committed to someone else and he had no hope of winning. That's when it struck her. It was going to be a difficult road getting him back. She genuinely wanted his return. He was her support, even though she had diminished him. Knowing that she was the most important person in his universe, she turned to him as the one source of consolation. Still, how could she make up for the damage she'd done to his confidence and feelings? Could she find a way to make her marriage and job work together while still making him feel appreciated and special? She knew it would be very difficult. However, she was focused and goal-oriented, sure that everything was possible for her to do if she put her mind to it. I'm feeling positive. For a while, she observed the kids playing, a dejected smile on her face. It developed into a sincere smile after a short while. She would start her journey by resolving a problem at work. She made an effort to feel sympathy for Bob, but she was unable. He had betrayed the business, her husband, and her. Now she realized that she had been duped by his flattery. It was time for his deeds to catch up with him. To arrange a meeting time, she gave a call in advance. The HR representative and their attorney were ready. They had come while she was away, and after putting up with Bob, she knew there would be difficult decisions to make. But she was determined to face the next challenge. She had faced obstacles in the past, so this day felt different. Compared to before, it was not as intimidating. His smile vanished when Bob entered and saw who was there. Bob hadn't met Angela before, so she didn't have to introduce him. Beverly did not waste any time. This is HR, S. Angela Bob. This meeting will be audited by her. Regarding your recent conduct, we have learned some unsettling information. To be fair, we would also like to hear your side of the story. Jack intervened. After informing us about the merger discussions, it appears that you rushed to the other business to discredit our CEO and our company. We are aware of the defamation campaign you launched in an attempt to win us over. Our partner business voiced worries, and as we try to find a solution, we have put a halt to our conversations. They have made it apparent that in order for the talks to proceed, you must leave. They think that if you behaved in this manner with us, you could behave similarly toward them. Bob struggled to reply, becoming scarlet in many places. Thus, that is accurate. I guess I'm getting dropped. This time, you've definitely prepared. I won't waste my time, even though I know you will describe the appeals process. It was wise for your business to let someone like me go. Restructuring is needed or else nothing will remain. Beverly got annoyed when he grinned at her. You started to get comfortable. I did a good job of manipulating your husband and boosting your ego, even if he was your greatest sales asset. We never went over that line, which is good. You would have been too preoccupied with yourself to see anyone else. Anyhow, it's irrelevant right now. I'll depart today and let payroll know where my last paycheck should be sent. Beverly, I hope you handle things well. Anger shot through Beverly. It wasn't until Bob gave her the explanation that she realized the true significance of exciting times. It's a proverb from China or even a curse. Boring times indicate stability, whereas chaotic situations suggest upheaval and difficulty. She answered in a cool manner, wishing Mr. Adler all the best. Permit me to add one more proverb. The deceitful never prosper. Put an end to looking for an easy way out and work to earn what you are due. I'm going to miss you. At that point, Jack got up and started to leave with Beverly. Frustrated, Bob started to say something, but Angela cut him off. "Now, Mr. Adler, pay attention. After you sign a few documents, you're free to continue living your life. Do not make this more difficult than it needs to be." He paused and rethought his strategy upon seeing two bulky security guards. Dave got a wonderful deal on the house. He promptly approved the roofing contractor, and the new gray tin roof was completed in 2 weeks, matching the exterior paint color he had selected. In addition, he made the decision to refinish the original hardwood floors and remove the carpet. The house had a wraparound porch, which Dave used to watch the sunsets and keep cool during the summer months. He put ceiling fans over the porch swing and the rockers. Even so, with his savings and retroactive compensation, he could afford the house with a down payment. He chose to follow his lawyer's advice and accept a settlement rather than going to court, even though he would still have been responsible for a 15-year mortgage. It wasn't as much as expected, but it was still enough to pay cash for the house, complete the required improvements, and still have some money left over in addition to his savings and severance compensation. The fact that Bev wouldn't consent to combining their finances was another source of contention. They each kept their own accounts and made a set payment into a household fund. He knew that since they never had a prenuptial agreement, he would be entitled to half of the house's value in the event of a divorce, given the stark differences in their salaries. For a few years, he might even receive cash assistance. The notion of how much that would irritate her made him smile. In the end, he allowed Bev to handle the divorce papers because, as his new employer, she was already in charge of the majority of their life. Dave realized he was gifted from birth. To his astonishment, his years of experience in sales turned out to be a benefit. He was liked by 75% of the salespeople he worked with. He was not a gamer. I didn't anticipate receiving presents or favors, and I cut ties with anyone who attempted to coerce him into accepting inferior goods. All he wanted was decent service at a reasonable price, and he gave business to people who lived up to his standards. The other 25% soon discovered that Dave didn't need fancy dinners, pricey activities, or trips. While some were set in their ways and lost him as a client, others valued his direct approach. Sal was glad to collaborate with Dave. Their prices for materials and services were constantly cheaper. Dave made the most of vendor offers to have technicians come in for inspections and ideas, most of which were put into practice, and he fulfilled deadlines. Dave was well liked by the staff because his methods simplified their work and raised their bonuses. Susan insisted that he go out to eat with them at least twice a month, and the topic of his predicament came up frequently. Sal sensibly kept his distance, but Susan was unyielding. "When are you going to give up trying to make her life difficult and give her back? She's experienced a great deal. She asks me how I'm doing every time she calls. If you're content. She may try to hide it, but when she inquires about anyone else in your life, you can hear the melancholy in her voice. I relay your words to her, that until the ring is removed, you won't see anyone." Dave put up with this chat for a few times before responding with a hint of annoyance. "Susan, you have my utmost respect. Your photo would be in the dictionaries section dedicated to the ideal wife. However, allow me to inquire. When you got married to Sal, you had a great profession. You worked for a while more before deciding to become a full-time mother. Has Sal ever ignored you, skipped crucial dates, or prioritized his business above your family? Did he minimize your contribution to the partnership?" Following a pause, she acknowledged that there were very few occasions when work had to take first, and even in those instances, Sal had shown her affection thereafter. "To be honest, I never had that experience. Bev frequently expressed that her work came first. As a result, I lost ties and friends. I'm just now beginning to reestablish my social life, granting invitations to small parties that hold great significance for me. I've been wanting a tiny garden for a long time, and I've begun one because I love my new house and have room for my hobbies. Does it imply that I'm not missing her? Not at all. Before her profession took over, I recall the good times we used to have on impromptu travels that were code for great conversations and deeper relationships. These recollections, though, are disappearing. Her self-centeredness is still what's new. She wants me back, but why? Above all, why hasn't she contacted me if she wants me back? She still behaves as though I ought to visit her. If she isn't prepared to work hard to make our strained marriage better, she doesn't seem to be all that interested in it. Not a one phone call has reached me. She doesn't seem to be in heartbreak, in my opinion. She ought to put out the effort in this instance. I like you both very much. I work for your spouse, too. However, this will be our last discussion regarding Beverly, if I may be excused. Despite his calm demeanor, his message was evident. Give it a go. Susan looked ashamed, and Sal looked perplexed. As he was walking away, she stood up and gave him a surprise embrace. I apologize to Dave, and promise not to bother you again, but you are wrong. She really does miss you a lot, but she's afraid to talk to you. She's afraid of your response and isn't sure what to say. I'll give her a call soon to let her know what you said. I swear that this will be my final involvement. She kissed him on the cheek, grinning. Besides, I shouldn't be interfering. You're too good at what you do. Our retirement plans have greatly enhanced as a result of your efforts. Continue. Dave had no idea that Sal was thinking about retiring. He was barely 50 years old. However, there were whispers that after his daughter started her career, he might resign once he felt comfortable leaving her in control. Dave thought for a moment if he could handle working with someone else like Beverly. Beverly went back to her empty house, ordered takeaway, and pretended to watch TV once more. The unexpected arrival of the chairman and 2 board members startled everyone in the office, and she had just about escaped major penalties. Feeling like a student called before the principal, she felt dizzy as they called her into the conference room. Their solemn expressions didn't exactly fill her with optimism. There was what seemed like an eternity of silence before the senior board member spoke. Okay, Beverly, tell us what transpired, and more significantly, why. You'll soon find yourself out of here, so be truthful. Since we have always trusted you, it would be disappointing if we suddenly began to have second thoughts. She needed some time and pauses to gather herself before she could eventually tell her story. She acknowledged giving in to her ego. Her choices had been rash and dependent on people who didn't have the company's best interests at heart. When she was done, they exchanged sympathetic glances and seemed relieved. What's going on at home? Have you made up yet? She experienced yet another rush of emotions. Beverly whispered her gratitude as the chairman handed her a box of Kleenex. No, and I doubt we will either. My spouse and I haven't spoken in weeks. He moved to a new location, got a new job, and bought a house with the intention of staying there. Chairman, I've always appreciated Dave. It seems strange that he would ignore your efforts to get back in touch. Beverly flushed and said, ashamed, that she hadn't reached out and didn't know what to say. Chairperson sighed. That's it for you. We'd better take your resignation right away. Your aptitude for problem-solving and your will to succeed were 2 of the qualities I valued most in you. You obviously don't want your husband back, and hesitating suggests that someone might not be prepared for a senior leadership position. I remember a time when nothing could stop you from achieving your goals. Though the reality prevented her from reacting angrily, his comments still wounded. He laughed, and she felt her face heat. You are there. I was starting to believe that I had lost you. Pay close attention. Bill, you're still in a vulnerable situation. Jack and I are your sole allies, and we've risked everything for you. Don't try to undermine us. You're still employed, but don't count on receiving a bonus or a great evaluation this year. You do have another chance, though. Let me clarify, though. This division was about to collapse. We know what lies ahead in the difficulties. We will not be in business in 3 years if we keep going in the same direction. We made the decision to sell this division while it was still doing well. Your recent error has made that plan vulnerable. To ensure the division's survival, you must figure out how to bring it back to life and suggest fresh goods and services. Be direct. You redeem yourself if you are successful. It's game over if you lose. You've got a year from us. His voice grew softer. Beverly, that's the best we can do. If you face challenges, I'm confident you'll make us proud. She didn't think a handshake would be enough because she felt overpowered. She gave them all a hearty embrace and vowed to give it her all. When the others had gone, she gave the chairman her final hug. When they separated, he took her hands. I would like to provide some non-work-related personal advice. You will have to get in touch with Dave if you genuinely want him back. You have wounded his pride, which is why he won't come to you. Right now, he's got a solid career, friends, and a promising future. You have to be sincere in your desire to be a partner. At the first hint of a reversal, it ends. Sincerely, I think you might have forgotten, but Dave is quite observant. He was aware of this division's problems the previous year. The previous time I was there, we even had a quick conversation about it during which he brought up the possible risks. He even offered suggestions on how to realign our efforts. I told him to talk to you about it. I don't think that conversation ever happened. Perhaps our current predicament wouldn't exist if events had transpired differently. Give me a call if you need assistance, and I'll supply it if I believe it is necessary. Examine my remarks regarding career and personal life, then make informed decisions. She went back to her office after leaving the meeting room. Beverly informed Jen, who was waiting for her, that it wasn't all bad news, and that she just needed some time to process the information. In addition, she instructed Jen to make sure she was alone the rest of the day. Beverly barricaded herself in and thought about her life's greatest ambition. With Susan's assistance, how might she win Dave's affection again? She got her strategy started. Beverly struck up a discussion after perusing Dave's Facebook profile. She found that he had used some bonus money to purchase an ancient car, which he was carefully refurbishing in his new garage. He posted updates on his progress online, requesting a front bumper cover, among other things. Determined to get back in touch with him, she searched through websites. Fortunately, she was contacted about a front end that was in excellent shape, but the back end had damage from an accident involving his relatives. Dave put it in a field for 6 months after realizing how expensive it would be to fix. She swiftly negotiated a lower price and purchased the immaculate interior. With Susan's help, Beverly carefully considered how she would approach. Dave invited mostly his co-workers and a few neighbors to his barbecue. He easily consented when Susan asked whether she might bring a friend. Beverly heard her warning, so this better not go wrong. Tension with Sal could arise if he becomes agitated. On the bright side, I've told him you're just getting to his apartment, and he has no idea who my friend is. Beverly pledged to quit immediately if things didn't work out. After making several changes to her attire, she finally realized it was simply a casual barbecue and chose a sundress that was both stylish and comfortable, along with his favorite shade of light blue. It bared her legs, falling to her knees. She wore her hair down and applied little makeup to accentuate her beauty. She wore only her wedding band, engagement ring, and a little necklace that Dave had given her when they were first engaged. When Beverly got to his residence, she had a mixture of nerves and excitement. She was taken aback by how large it was. Charming as hell, with its wrap-around porch and gravel walks where a few people were chit-chatting as she walked up to the door. Just as she was ready to knock, it swung open to reveal Dave. His startled eyes grew wide. They had not waited for him to say anything. It had been 10 weeks since their last meeting. She spoke something fast. "Hi there, Dave. Don't be upset, please. Since Susan invited me, I was rather eager to visit you. Should you prefer that I go? I know exactly what you mean, but might I just stay?" After a little interval, he grinned. "Beverly, please come in. I want to show you my house, and we should discuss later for sure." She gripped on tight as he extended his hand to take hers, having a wave of strong feelings. He paused, but did not move away. Everyone was shocked to hear he was married when he presented her to them. She felt a surge of relief when she saw that his wedding band was still on his finger. Perhaps there remained hope for them. When Susan took her away for a private talk, she finally let go of his hand. Susan encouraged them as they whispered plans to one another. "Right now, he's a little taken aback by you. Remind him to stay in the now and avoid talking about the past. Give him space if he looks hesitant, but be as warm as he lets. It's time for you to get to know him again. All right?" Beverly nodded, grateful for the guidance. He was outdoors when she went looking for him. His yard was much bigger than hers, and it was impressive and well kept. His building was shiny from a new roof and new paint. Abruptly, she saw him emerge with a happy little girl in one hand and a gorgeous bird feeder in the other. She was giving him a hug and kissing him on the cheeks. How content they appeared to be together. Strike Beverly hard. At their age, she might not be able to provide him with that family, and she considered how her profession had taken precedence over her personal life. She ignored those ideas so he could stay focused. If they were going to be together again, she had to stay here. Adoption might be their route to a family with restored clarity. She let go of her past goals and became open to new opportunities. "Who is your pal?" the young girl inquired politely. Beverly wasn't sure if Dave understood the affection, but he still grinned. "This is my good pal, Ari. Although I'm a little older than her, I am aware that she will experience some heartbreak in her future." He put her down gently. Do you think you can handle this on your own, Ari? If not, I'll set it down for you on the table. You can also ask your sister for assistance. I still remember what I promised. Tomorrow, I'll drop over to offer my assistance." With a sweet, breathy voice that made you want to give her a big hug, she welcomed Beverly and raced over to a pretty young woman who was joyfully chatting and pulling at her hand. Grinning, they walked over to Beverly and Dave. "Dave, thank you so much." The significance of this to her cannot be overstated. She spent hours gazing at the birdhouse you gave her, and she became ecstatic when a bluebird family moved in. She also adores the book you gave her about birds. She now knows every name by heart, even though I had to read them to her. Her preschool is very impressed, so we're going to the local aviary. If you are able, she would like you to attend as well. I'll try to make it work. We'll see. I wish I could come along, but I should go now, I think. It will take both of us to keep her calm because she will be bouncing off the walls. The girl appeared to be quite young. In other words, she was attractive and didn't hide it. Her top was modest but emphasized her features, and her shorts were casual. Her smile was equally captivating. When the woman stood on her toes to greet Dave and playfully touched his arm, Beverly felt a twinge of jealousy. He flushed, and Beverly noticed the lipstick stain on his cheek, which made her irritated. With a smile on her face, the woman seemed to be challenging Beverly. "You have to be his spouse. I really apologize. We eventually came to believe that you were a dream. My name is Marcia. I live next door to Dave." Beverly resisted the impulse to chastise Marcia. "Oh, I promise you, I really am. I think you'll be seeing a lot more of me going forward." They stared at each other for a moment before Marcia grinned and turned to leave, swaying her hips a little. With a smirk of playfulness, Dave stopped Beverly from expressing her frustration as she turned to face him, her anger boiling. "Calm down, sweetie. She is a young woman and she hasn't had an easy life at home. Her grandfather, who is a little lost, is the one she lives with. She's likable, and her younger sister is adorable. Furthermore, what specifically annoys you? You haven't reached out in 11 weeks nor said much in the 2 years before that. I figured you'd moved on." Beverly opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. Instead, tears filled her eyes and she walked away. Why did he always reduce everything to business? She knew the answer, but avoided facing it. Susan came over shooting daggers at Dave and ushered Beverly into the bathroom to collect herself, even as she took a moment. She admired the beautiful whirlpool tub, imagining how relaxing it would be to soak in it. After a few minutes, she regained her composure, especially remembering how Dave had called her hun, a term he hadn't used in a long time. She shared this with Susan, who explained that Dave had finally begun expressing his feelings, which was a promising sign. "I guess I deserved what he said, but that didn't make it easy to hear. I came here hoping to revive my marriage, and running away isn't a good start. So, Susan, please stay out of it no matter what happens. This is tough, and I'll just have to endure it. Maybe I can turn it around. Or maybe you'll face setbacks. Stay strong. And if it gets tough, don't hesitate to stand your ground. Either way, he'll notice." Feeling more composed, Beverly returned to the party to find Dave at a table with an older gentleman and Ari happily sitting on his lap. He made the stand, but she motioned for him to stay put and sat next to him. Ari looked at Beverly for a moment before reaching out to touch her necklace. "Ari, don't bother the nice lady," the older man said gently, surprising both of them. Beverly opened her arms and Ari scooted over. "Are you fond of it? Dave gave it to me a long time ago. It's one of my favorite things." "Pretty?" "Yes, it is, honey. One day a wonderful young guy who means a lot to you, just like Dave meant to me, might give you something exceptional. If he does, remember where it came from and cherish it. Now, if you promise to be extremely careful, you can wear it for a moment. Is that something you can do? Assurance?" Ari gazed up at Beverly, her expression serious. "I swear." Beverly lifted her onto the table, turning her back to Dave. "Can you help me a little here?" He seemed unsure, hesitating. "Beverly, you don't have to." Silence. She promised to take care of it. "Correct, Ari?" Beverly felt his fingers brush across her neck and felt it tremble a little, the closest thing to a relationship in months. He chuckled with glee as she delicately wrapped the chain around his neck. Then she led her into the hallway and to a big mirror so she could look in it and see herself. Beverly smiled as Ari clapped her hands, happiness lighting up her face. It really didn't take much to provide joy to a child. After that, Ari stayed close to Beverly, periodically checking up on her sister, who was having fun with a young man who worked for Dave. Beverly sung a song that her mother used to sing to her while she softly rocked. She looked up, feeling the weight of all eyes on her, and Dave turned away, emotion shining in his eyes. Beverly entered the house carrying a sleeping infant, too tired to pursue him, so she just rocked him gently. Dave came back a little while later and suggested that they put her in a bedroom so she could snooze. She'll awaken soon, bursting with vitality. Beverly trailed behind him into the bedroom where he covered Ari with a thin blanket and placed her down. "Will it frighten her to wake up by herself?" she inquired. "No, she is aware of her whereabouts," he answered. "She'll let us know as soon as she wakes up." Just as Dave was turning to depart, they stood together and watched the contented young girl. Beverly drew him in closer and surprised them both with a kiss. He answered, and Beverly put a finger to his lips when they finally parted. She kissed him again and said, "Enjoy the moment," softly moving him out of the room. For now, that felt like enough. Curious, Marcia met them on the back deck. We tucked her in and she is now asleep. She seemed to be gone for some time. Marcia glanced across at Beverly. "I appreciate your kindness towards her. It's not that much for her. Still, it's strange. Dave told me you didn't like children." Beverly was furious with Dave for disclosing such a private matter. Dave said something just as she was ready to respond. "Marcia, that's not really accurate. Although she had no desire to have children of her own, she gets along well with the ones that we have seen." Marcia said, "Oh, why did you not want children? Marcia, when you don't know someone, you shouldn't inquire about their personal affairs." All right, let it go. It was obvious from his tone that Dave loved her. Marcia appeared contrite right away. "I apologize, I didn't intend to go too far." With a twinge of sympathy, Beverly gave Marcia a hug. "Everything is okay. You had no malicious intent. Together we can wipe away your tears and improve your appearance." Dave froze in shock as Beverly escorted her to the restroom. Beverly took a cloth and towel and used them to gently pat Marcia's face dry. As if frightened to let go, Marcia clung to her. Beverly made Marcia wash her face when she had calmed down and saw how young her skin looked. Marcia had her hair in a casual ponytail and didn't wear makeup. "Right now I feel better." Marcia answered, "We can head back, give it a minute. Let your hair down and I'll give it a little TLC, Beverly recommended. Marcia followed through. As she worked through her tangles while seated in front of the mirror, Beverly instinctively started braiding Marcia's hair, which enhanced her appearance. She added mascara, a smidge of lipstick, and a dash of blush. Marcia sat silently, taken aback by her metamorphosis. "Whoa, how did you treat me?" She let out a gasp. "Simply made what you already had better. You are stunning. All you needed was a minor adjustment. Let's return and dazzle everyone now." When they got back, Beverly gave encouragement. For a brief while, the mood subsided, and before long, multiple men were competing for Marcia's interest. Beverly returned her steps to Dave at the grill. "When did we get so young?" he asked, his smile half sad. Beverly said, "It sure feels good to see it. Our first kiss is one of my favorite memories. Even though I was still getting to know myself, I knew we were meant to be. Those days are long gone. We were altered by life. We matured and changed our priorities. Suddenly, work and obligations took precedence over spontaneity and fun. Though we were young, things happen in life." He thought about it. Beverly had nostalgic feelings. "When may I come see your garden?" He smiled and ushered her towards it. Its neatness and size startled her. Along with several varieties of squash and beans, he named several plants, including black crim, Rutgers, and yellow boy tomatoes. He went over the advantages of the mulch and flowers. Ari woke up at that very moment and pulled at Dave's pant leg. He carried her up with ease. "Select." She pointed to a beautiful yellow tomato and exclaimed. Beverly watched with pride as the young girl wrenched the tomato off its vine, as Dad carefully carried her over. "Consume." Dave chuckled as Ari spoke. "So that she can eat a sandwich, she wants you to wash it. She's learned from me not to eat anything until it's been cleaned. I still want to be safe even though I use organic pesticides. Excellent concept." Ari approached her when she extended her hands. As they pushed her back, she gave her a hug and turned to hide the tears from Dave's eyes. Her maternal instincts were very powerful. Marcia stepped forward, but Ari would not come out of Beverly's grasp. "That's okay, though. When she's done with her sandwich, I'll help Mr. Dave prepare the dinner. You can take her outside. I have a spot reserved for you both." Marcia grinned and turned to go. After carefully cleaning the tomato, Beverly located the bread and mayo and assembled Ari's sandwich. She urged Ari to keep piling on tomatoes until it was nearly full. This may become a little messy. Carrying the platter outdoors while Ari held onto her clothes, Beverly thought. Ari went from one lap to the next as Marcia held a space between her and Dave for them. She nibbled on a piece of hot dog, some corn, and half of her sandwich. For a little girl of her age, that was a lot. Beverly was accurate. It was disorganized. Marcia then led her out to change into new clothing. Seated beneath the festoon lights, they enjoyed the dusk while admiring the setting sun. At first, she was surprised that there was no booze. Dave revealed in private that it was because Marcia's grandfather was an alcoholic in recovery. After a while, Dave took out a cooler with just enough beers to create a laid-back vibe. His music was playing, romantic ballads and gentle instrumentals. Dave put his arm around Beverly and she curled up against him, happy as a wave. Marcia was dancing with one of her pals, savoring the occasion. A well-known love ballad from their time in college began to play. Dave got up and drew her up to dance. In an instant, Beverly took off her sandals and was in his arms, feeling carefree and young once more. She gave him a firm grip. Filled with passion, he stroked her cheek and pushed back her hair. Even after the song ended, they stayed in that moment. She took a step back and saw the look of surprise on Susan's face and the smile of approval on Marcia's. Once more, tears started to flow, and after a group hug, they had to use the restroom. She believed there was no need for another round of makeup correction, so she went to wash her face. They thanked Dave for the evening as the guests departed. Marcia gave them both a deep hug, but when she withdrew, her face showed concern. "What's not right?" Beverly inquired. "I would have loved for you two to be my parents. Perhaps then, like Ari, I would have received the assistance I require. I'm so worried now that I'm 18. There will be no more support checks. Ari will receive one, but not a lot of them. Gramps already gets nervous about us moving in. He'll throw us out if the money runs out." Beverly was shocked, and she prayed never to see Dave's expression again. "Go listen to me, Marcia. When times are hard, you come here first. Do you get it? We've got you and Ari covered, whatever the circumstances." Beverly gave Marcia another hug and gave her a card with her private number written on it. "Hold on to this. Call me if you need anything." Marcia sobbed once again as she held them close. She gradually turned her back on them till she was out of sight, until she eventually regained her composure. Deep in contemplation, Dave took a seat on the porch swing. Beverly walked over and grasped his hand. Though her attention had been on her profession, she knew she could always rely on Dave in a crisis. "How will we proceed?" she inquired. "Regarding what?" Returning to reality regarding the girls, he responded, "We cannot abandon them to that circumstance. What actions are available to us? If I could, I would take them in. Why don't you?" How that would work, I'm not sure. She is now 18. Beverly made a point. Now that she's an adult, she can reside anywhere. She may request complete custody of Ari from the court. The grandfather would probably agree to let them go. This is my strategy. Since I'm skilled in handling legal matters, I'll take care of them. She needs to know that you are the one leading for both her and Ari. A young mother and child that hit hard, taken in by a single man. Won't it appear weird?" Beverly let go a hint of annoyance. "Give me a listen, Dave Waxman. You are not a solitary man. Your spouse is in need of your assistance. I realize that for far too long I took you for granted. I'm just getting started in attempting to put things right now. Are you still in love with me?" It was unsettling to ask that question. She was also worried about what he would say. His contemplative expression filled her with dread and doubt. "I'm in love with the person I met, not the person you have become. If we could begin anew. Many things need to change. Beverly, I don't want you to be obedient, but I do want you to regard me as an equal. More attention and respect than you've shown me in the last few years are things I deserve. I've learned that I don't want to return to that life since I left, and I'm not going back to that house. I need to know that you would put me before work if it came down to it. Honestly, I don't think you're capable of that." Beverly tried not to cry, but she was, and he tenderly grasped her hand. I truly want to give it another shot, and I understand what you're saying. I miss the small gestures we used to exchange before things became too complicated and waking up close to you. We have a few things to take care of. First, in order to help us get back together, we had to locate a marriage counselor. In order to always make time for one another, we also need to come to an agreement on how we spend our time. Do you think that's fair? If our relationship were to resume, would you be open to staying here? It was too much. His goal was to keep their union intact. He cherished her still. He hugged her and comforted her with soft strokes on her back as she sobbed for several minutes. She eventually composed herself enough to reply. He waited, not sure if she understood. If she wanted to stay married, he would never be the second fiddle again. It had to have to do with their collaboration. To be honest, he didn't think she could pull it off. Her answer took him by surprise. For the most part, I agree. I don't live at the house. It feels empty without you, even though it's great. I know it will be difficult at first, but I'll get used to it if it strengthens our marriage. She let out a sigh. I need to find my way back home because I've lost my way. I really think the counselor idea is great, but I need your advice. Would you like to locate one? Or ought I to? Before making a decision, we must both agree. She sobbed on his shoulder for a bit before continuing. At last, she dabbed at her tears. Restoring our intimacy ought to be among our top priorities. Can I remain here tonight? I realize it's probably too early to share a bed. Right now, I truly need to wake up in your vicinity. My primary concern is you. I have to go to work still. In addition, I have to work really hard because I made several blunders. However, I swear to return home at a decent hour. In the event that anything unavoidable occurs, I will make a quick call. I'm determined to work hard to make sure that this doesn't occur once more. He had conditional faith in her. His old emotions started to surface again when he got over the pain she had inflicted. He came to the realization that he didn't want to lose the adult lives they had spent most of them together. He meant business when he said he would see a counselor. They required expert assistance. It seemed like she was saying all the right things, and he wanted to know if she really meant them. All right. You are welcome to take the room that Ari slept in. It has a private restroom, and we'll find you a shirt if you need anything to sleep in. I concur. She shook her head, startling him. No. I noticed the lovely tub in the owner's suite. I believe a soak would be beneficial because I've been anxious lately. He soon heard her singing gently in the tub. Her voice was beautiful, and he struggled to think of the last time he'd heard her perform. It seems like a very long time ago. It was an indication that she was happy. She emerged in approximately 40 minutes, her t-shirt a size too small. As she passed him, she noticed his curious expression and gave him a teasing smile. He looked at the clock and his eyes widened. 2:15 a.m. He could see her standing at the edge of the bed since there was enough moonlight. Drink. Even though we weren't in the same bed, I couldn't sleep knowing you were here. Please let me sleep on your bed. All I want is to snuggle and experience your arms enveloping me. Dave, please. Rather than pushing her away, he chose to draw back the covers. He felt her shiver as she slid in. He encircled her firmly in his arms. He sensed her sobbing and remained silent. She was asleep soon after he noticed her breathing had calmed down. After thinking about their future for a long, he laid awake before smiling and falling asleep. Her eyes opened, and she wondered where she was for a second. She sensed his arms encircling her, and everything returned. Her spouse appeared to be quite content as they were in bed together. Savoring the moment, she leaned back into him with gentle pressure. This went on for several minutes until he started to move. She stopped, but reacted when she sensed a movement of his hand. At that moment, the door sprang open, letting a small tornado jump onto the bed. "Mr. Dave, get awake!" Marcia covered her lips with her hands as she stood at the entrance. "I really apologize." She fled as soon as I turned my back on her, even though I had urged her to stay downstairs. Dave laughed and gave Ari a light tickle. She squirmed and giggled, enjoying every second of it. "Marcia, it's all okay. I have two beautiful gals in my bed right now." Beverly saw that Marcia's expression was not quite right. "What's amiss, my dear?" "Apparently, Gramps hasn't recently gone grocery shopping. I was about to ask Larry if I might give him some of your cereal." Beverly felt bad for Marcia since she appeared to be quite ashamed. She requires more than porridge. She requires a hearty breakfast. After we've had a moment to get dressed, we'll come down and either prepare you something or take you somewhere, if food is insufficient. Is that acceptable? Silently nodding, Marcia picked up an agitated Ari. Ari, hurry up. While Mrs. Beverly and Mr. Dave get ready, let us grab you some juice. The moment the door closed, Beverly spun around, ferociously looking. I apologize, my dear. I was thinking of something else, but that can wait. What kind of person really doesn't stock up on enough food for his kids? What happened to your robe? Taking it from the closet, she walked out. Dave came into the kitchen a little later, having just finished using the restroom. The cabinets were all ajar, and Beverly was annoyed. He debated explaining that being a single man, he wasn't really concerned about having a well-stocked kitchen, but ultimately opted against it. Beverly was outside already, getting what Dave called the bag. A seller had once spilt red wine all over her light blue outfit at a work lunch. She began keeping a bag of extra clothes in her trunk since she had to excuse herself to change, selecting an informal outfit. She came back shortly and told Dave to get moving. They needed to feed their children. Dave was waiting at the door after a quick shave and wash, and he couldn't help but notice how Beverly always looked put together, yet still looked smart. Beverly realized there was no car seat for Ari, so they almost skipped breakfast, but she agreed to go in the back with Ari when Dave remarked they were only a half-mile away from a fantastic breakfast buffet. It was a big meal for the youngsters. Dave cast a sidelong glance at Beverly, sensing that they were on the same page regarding the kids' lack of food. When Ari questioned if Dave was angry with Beverly, he responded with a smile that said he was only a little bit since she had eaten the last pancake. Beverly's eyes were full of frustration. He added swiftly that there was always more to be had. Beverly demanded that Dave pull into the parking area of the mall. First, they were there for 2 hours. She sent Dave to install the greatest car seat they had, which she had purchased. They were deep into their shopping spree by the time he came back. Ari was thrilled when Beverly made sure they each had 3 new outfits. Marcia seemed bashful. Beverly hugged her tenderly. Please allow me to finish this. I was never able to go through this with my own kids, and for once, I'd want to act like we're going on a wonderful day out. Soon afterward, Ari became bored and Dave took her for a stroll while Beverly and Marcia went shopping. Dave pushed the cart as Ari filled it out in the grocery store, where they made their final visit. Marcia and Beverly talked about each item as though it were for a special dinner. With much excitement, Ari arranged food in the cart. Beverly was tempted to put some back, but she gave in to Ari's pleas. Take a look. It was a calm drive home. As Beverly was unloading the groceries, she inquired abruptly about the number of bedrooms we had. Dave thought it was intriguing. She asked, "We? 4. Why?" She escorted the girls upstairs, rolling her eyes. She gave him a call a little while afterward. Biggest guest room was where he discovered them, the one with the bathroom connected. The girls' room will be like this. They now own it. It must be a secure area. To enable Marcia to visit at any time, you must ensure that she has the keys. I understand. Ari was in Beverly's arms, looking resolute, while Marcia stood there, her countenance a mixture of fear and hope. Beverly waited for him to answer. When he remained silent, he saw Beverly begin to shake. Then he grinned. Yes, it will be. I'll let you females handle the decorating. He turned to face Marcia and said, Do you know what we're giving you? Without uttering a word? She gave him a hug and started crying. Beverly set down a sleeping area and embraced them both. He excused himself to the living room after a little while and sat in his favorite chair, reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed in a single day. Beverly quickly settled in next to him on the large recliner, whispering to him and patting his chest. Does this not alter everything? I'll take Marcia with me when I return to the old house to pack up what I need. So until we get back, you have childcare responsibilities. Ensure she consumes a nutritious meal. Fine. We plan to return in 3 hours. She turned to leave, then stopped and leaned in to give him a kiss. There was just a glimmer of concern in her eyes. If you want me back, that is. He gave her a firm hug. Being apart won't help with the many issues we need to resolve. You're usually more organized than I am, so you have my trust on this. I love you enough to try even if it won't be simple. With me, are you? Was she in his company? What a pointless inquiry. Though she was crying, she was able to grin despite the flood of words that was rising within of her. "I'm on board." His smile comforted her as she hurried upstairs to collect Marcia and headed out of the house, prepared for their next move together. After a brief period of silence, she inquired, "Why are you helping us?" Beverly considered her response carefully. "I really want to assist and I care about you." So she wanted to be honest first. Anyone with a heart would want to help you out as you're in a difficult circumstance. Second, you are significant to me because Dave finds you significant. We were apart, you know, but this weekend is ideally the beginning of our reconciliation. She hesitated, using our time apart to collect her thoughts. Dave truly wanted kids, and I was selfishly denying him that, I realized. I didn't realize I had feelings until I met you and Ari. I feel bad now for not giving him the chance. This is my chance to make a change, both of you. Although I can't ever be your mother, I still want to set a good example for Ari and you. Whatever transpires between Dave and myself. Although I'm aware that you might not comprehend completely, could I still try? Her eyes filled with tears as she reached out to grasp Beverly's hand. "All right, put me down for the ideal family. Is it true that both parents must be present?" Beverly needed to stop. Marcia gave Beverly a firm hug, which made her feel better. She calmed herself and gave Marcia a soft peck on the cheek. "I'm grateful." Marcia sniffled at the phrase baby, and they embraced once again. Beverly then revealed something significant to be a real member of our family. "You will have to move in with us permanently. You can apply to the courts for custody of Ari now that you are 18 years old. All legal fees will be paid by us. No one can take her from us once it's over. It's time for you to get comfortable saying yes." "Mom, this is a fantastic moment to do it." Marcia firmly held Beverly's hand. She whispered with tears in her eyes, "Indeed, Mother." Moving through the house, the two gathered Marcia's possessions. To fit everything in the car and fill the trunk and back seat, 4 journeys were required. Marcia remarked, "You have a nice house, but it doesn't feel like Dave's. You know, his feels warmer." Beverly gave a nod. "You're accurate. I've spent enough time in the cold. It's the reason we're selling it. I'm not going to stay there any longer. I adore the warmth right now." The car was filled when they got back. Dave questioned Beverly why she hadn't taken the truck when he emerged with Ari in tow. She gave his arm a gentle tap. "You bring it up now. We'll make use of it later. While we unpack, consider what you would like for supper." Later, Dave prepared a straightforward stir-fry using Brussels sprouts, chicken, peppers, onions, mushrooms, and zucchini. With a unique touch, he served it over rice with a side dish of diced, colorful tomatoes combined with vinegar, olive oil, and basil. It had a fantastic appearance, and Ari, who was a tomato fiend, almost threw a fit because she just wanted it. "Ari, do you want to be as tough as your sister when you grow up?" Beverly inquired. Ari gave a nod. "After that, you must consume a range of foods. This will appeal to you. You already get some enjoyment in it. Take a bite." Ari's eyes grew even brighter when Beverly fed her a tiny bit. Dave took over. "That's additional. Please. Don't forget to give Beverly credit for her assistance." Ari gave Beverly a smile. "Please more." Beverly added some to her plate, grinning proudly. Ari responded, "Thank you," grabbing her hand. Beverly helped Ari tidy up after supper, and she sent Dave into the living room. After coming back in her pajamas, Ari climbed upon his lap. Together they watched a movie, which Ari almost finished before nodding out. "Grandpa's gone and I locked the door," said Marcia when she came back from the next door. Beverly put a soothing touch on Dave's shoulder, but it was clear that he was frustrated. She gave Marcia a smile. "We're glad we have your new pajamas. Proceed to prepare yourself for sleep." When Marcia returned in her cozy pajamas, Beverly saw Dave's expression. She lightly taunted that just one of them was still a tiny child. Everyone was in bed by 10. Beverly emerged from the restroom sporting a cozy pajama set. She grinned as she realized Dave was observing her. "Let's simply unwind and enjoy our time together tonight. I know you two have been busy." Dave got up and leaned in to speak with her. "Beverly, I adore you." In that very moment, any conflict between them disappeared. She was overcome with emotion and realized that their love would never fade. They hugged, savoring the occasion. The flames came back immediately, and to his amazement, she reached for a pillow. She said I could use it if I needed to make some noise. You are aware of how much I like being near you and how boisterous I can be. I'm going to use this cushion a lot tonight because we have kids in the house, and I don't want to wake them up. It was enough to bring a small tear to her eye, though I hope she lost count of how many times she used it. She was content. Pillows were cheap, even if they consumed a portion of her salary. It would be worthwhile. Despite having set their alarms, Ari made the decision to wake them up. She was relieved that she had forced Dave to change into his shorts and that she had changed into her dress. They cuddled for a long time until Marcia came to pick Ari up so they could shower and change. They spent some time playing together, but not too much because of time constraints. Like any family, Marcia fixed them all breakfast and they sat down to eat. In an effort to not leave Marcia out, Ari insisted on a farewell kiss, and they both planted one on her cheek. It was easier for them both because Marcia drove and used Beverly's car to drop Dave off. Beverly commuted to work in Dave's pickup. Jen got to the office right after Beverly took a seat. "Who is the owner of that truck?" "It does, in my opinion." Beverly couldn't resist grinning. "If that is what you mean, it is my husband's. Let's get back to work now. During the interval, we can talk." Jen arrived early bringing goodies and coffee. Until they had finished their snack and were drinking their coffee, Beverly remained silent. "Jen, I've gotten back together with Dave. I might occasionally be gone for a few hours because we have some stuff to work through and we might need counseling. Please be patient with me. It won't always be easy and I may feel down. Here at work, you've always been there for me. I will probably depend on you even more. I did, however, succeed in getting you approved for a 7% rise. It's not much, but this is the best I can do. I appreciate you being there for me." Jen experienced both happiness and sorrow. In 3 months, her spouse, who had recently received a promotion, would be moving to a different state. The news had reached him on Friday. She received employment referrals from his company as well, and she was leaving for interviews the next week. As they broke the news, they were both overcome with emotion. "Boss, I still have 11 weeks remaining. I'll assist you in locating a replacement who shares your commitment." With an embrace, they resumed their work. While driving back home, Beverly got an idea. Marcia. After talking it over with Dave, he agreed it was a really good idea. Ari was vivacious and affectionate toward them both. After giving her read-a-tale a bath and lulling her to sleep, Beverly gave her to Marcia and cuddled up on the couch with Dave's arm around her. They gestured for Marcia to come back downstairs and join them. "Marcia, would you mind joining us for a little while? First, we would want to speak. What keeps you here exactly? You two are important to us. I assume you are aware of that. Anything is open for sharing with us." Throughout the evening, they observed her apparent anxiety, and she began to cry when they inquired. "When we didn't return home last night, Grandpa got quite upset and threw us out. I believe he has resumed drinking. He told me Ari could stay for the money, but I had to depart. I immediately returned home and shut the doors. He won't give our belongings to us. How am I meant to proceed?" Beverly consoled her, bringing her near. She was comforted by both of them till she relaxed. Afterwards, when Beverly was lying in bed, she was relieved that Marcia had mentioned that she returned home right away. They spoke about it once. Marcia was starting to feel better. "You must first appear in court and request custody as quickly as feasible. You'll give your home address to your lawyer tomorrow if we can find one for you. However, they'll inquire as to if you can help Ari. You're not working at the moment, so that could be difficult. Have you ever worked before?" With regret, Marcia acknowledged that she had briefly worked at a couple fast food restaurants. Dave gave Beverly a small smile, knowing she had a plan set. "Therefore, finding you a job is the first thing we must do. Luckily, my company has a few positions. After completing the necessary documentation, you can begin on Wednesday." With a relieved expression, Marcia inquired, "What will I be doing?" "In 3 months, I'll need a personal assistant. You will have to attend evening sessions in order to complete your 2-year degree. You will lose your job if you don't succeed or quit trying. However, I have faith in you. Don't disappoint us with that." Dave and Beverly got into bed as Marcia stopped crying. As soon as Beverly was beneath the covers, he planted a kiss on her. "Not that it bothers me, but why was that done? For everything you're doing for Marcia and Ari, that is. We'll need to arrange for Ari's daycare. Fortunately, Saul offers free daycare to his staff, so tomorrow I'll register her. I can take her riding with me. Should we get Marcia some transportation? Beverly paused to consider her response. Dave, what's going on here? We've reconciled, which I didn't think would occur. In addition, we're taking care of 2 girls, something I never thought we'd do. Are we going too quickly? At this point in our lives, I don't want anything to stand in the way of us. Shall we ignore them, return them to their grandfather, and offer them our best wishes? Her hold on him grew more firm. Not at all. I will see to it that they land somewhere safe in the event that something happens and we are unable to keep them. Right now, wherever they are is a better place for them than any place else we can imagine. I want to hold on to them for as long as I can. Please, my love. Yes, without a doubt, we will retain them. Although Marcia doesn't always behave like one, she is an adult legally. I'm more concerned about Ari. At 4 years old, she will look to us as her caregivers if we decide to retain her. Do you think that's okay? She remained silent for a while. I would have fled this 2 years ago. I would have hesitated a year ago. But now that you're in the photo, I'm really thrilled with it. I want to attempt, even though I have no idea how to do this. It was gone before he knew it. We'll succeed, my love. We've both erred in the past. Instead of being so consumed with your business, you ought to have given us a little more attention. Although you were my employer, I should have reminded you that we were partners in life, and I should have been more firm. I promise not to repeat those errors again. In order to make sure it doesn't happen again, I intend to be more forthright about how I feel and more determined in what I do. I still think it's a good idea to get counseling. We should investigate that after matters with the kids have calmed down. He was wondering if he had said too much when he felt tears on his shoulder. She gave him a light-hearted tap on the arm when he inquired. These are not depressing tears. They are happy tears. I am so happy to hear the term, our kids, from you. I never thought I'd hear it. For me, they are the missing component. We lost sight of the joy of parenthood because we became overly preoccupied with our own life. Having kids forces you to prioritize. It's not about you anymore. It concerns them. I would give anything to feel that happiness. Let's head to bed now. I wish to assist our daughter in getting ready for the corporate world tomorrow. You can also ensure that she picks up the appropriate lessons. She has to be registered for childcare. I am quite interested in Sal's response when you bring Ari tomorrow. Bev, we have to make the call tomorrow, for at least 30 minutes. Marcia really needs some new outfits, particularly because her grandfather forbade her from returning to her home. Ari also requires clothing. Since Ari isn't really ours, I need to talk to Saul about daycare. In addition, we must locate her a guardianship attorney. We must take immediate action on that. I'll attempt to convince her grandfather to support our plan when I visit him tomorrow. It will make the custody transfer easier. I concur. Speaking in a formal tone, she said, and regarding transportation, you were correct. To get to school, she will require a car. After she settles into her position, we can figure that out in a few months. Which sort ought to we buy her? Let's hold off on responding for 2 months. Nothing too fancy, nothing too ostentatious. She should find a starter car to be simple and safe. All we have to do is ensure its dependability. You are an expert in it, my love. You're able to handle that. We must go to bed now. Lots of work to be done tomorrow. Their small alarm clock had woken them up with smiles and a plan. Beverly realized that they needed to respect people's privacy. She laughed to herself that Ari was blissfully unaware of the changes ahead, while Marcia was confused. Beverly quickly got them into the car so they could go to the mall. She helped Marcia make some wise wardrobe decisions by demonstrating the kinds of garments that would be appropriate for a formal appearance. Beverly then urged her to choose some easygoing outfits. Marcia picked out 5 well-fitting trousers and a few of skirts. Beverly also advised her to choose proper undergarments for her new ensembles, reminding her to select a few more beautiful tops and some simple tees. She looked at Ari next. Everything amazed Ari. She quickly burst into laughter as Beverly assisted her in trying on a number of clothes, including some very pretty dresses. Ari wasn't sure about the shoe store at first, but she got enthusiastic when Beverly showed her some pink sneakers. After meeting them for lunch and pretending to be intrigued by their shopping tales, Dave came to the conclusion that he would have to sample their selections one ensemble at a time. He moved the car seat to his truck after lunch, waving to Ari as they sped away. When Beverly arrived with someone so young, Jen was taken aback. Beverly's request stunned her even more. Check to see whether she can be trained and whether she have any business acumen. After you work with her for a few days, I require complete candor. She'll replace you if she's capable. We'll find her another part if not. To you, who is this girl? Beverly looked red-faced as she spoke. Jen chuckled. I'd love to see her. Does she address you as Mom? Not quite yet. One day I hope to hear that. Beverly displayed her Ari photos, the most of which showed her being held by Dave. She's going to be a daddy's girl, I fear. That's something I can deal with, so long as I am able to be nearby as well. Jen laughed so hard she almost passed out. Really? An adolescent girl with such beauty. Simply bide your time till she brings home a boy you disapprove of. You better get ready for a few restless nights. Beverly had not given that possibility much thought. She questioned whether Dave still owned and was able to use the antique shotgun with 2 barrels that he had inherited from his grandfather. Marcia trailed behind Jen like a little sister, feeling a little overtaken by it all. To begin her paperwork, they brought her to Human Resources. Even though she began at the lowest pay tier, $22,000 annually, it seemed like a substantial amount to her. Just wait till you start paying your own bills, Beverly remarked with a smile. Then, it won't feel as large. She tried to reassure Marcia, seeing the worry on her face. Sweetie, that's years away. Until you complete your degree, I won't allow you to move out. We can then assess your feelings on it. Marcia was silent on the ride home. Beverly inquired about her day. That was a lot to process, but I'll get by. Take a look at my example. Beverly. Beaming, Marcia spoke once more. Now her voice was quieter. I could have erred in judgment today. Jen identified herself as your daughter when one of the other secretaries inquired about who I was. I was shocked that I neglected to correct her. I've started getting odd looks from people. Though she dismissed them, Beverly had also noticed those looks. She anticipated some unpleasant attention because her main priorities were saving herself and the company. It doesn't matter what people think. Permit them to make assumptions. Perhaps they'll handle you better. I've received worse nicknames. Upon arriving home, they discovered that Dave and his small assistant had made dinner, veggies and chicken on the grill. With ravenous appetites, they took a seat to eat. He wishes he could have photographed Saul's expression as he explained why he was running late and what he needed. He held Ari in his arms. Her tiny hands encircled his neck. Susan must have hurried over to the factory when he called her. Her aura was that of a loving grandma, and before long, Ari was cuddled in her arms as they talked. Ari was perplexed by Susan's tears as she revealed the amazing facts of their weekend to Ari. Saul was grinning the entire time, but he also appeared a little misty. Susan soon had Ari by the hand as they made their way to preschool. Ari clung to Susan for a while because she wasn't used to being around children her own age, but the teacher eventually persuaded her to play a game. She hardly noticed when Dave went an hour later. He told Susan and Saul about their past and asked whether they knew of any competent family law attorneys. Susan picked up the phone promptly. She served on a board that was dedicated to supporting kids in difficult circumstances. She scheduled a meeting with a well-known family law specialist who might help them after hours. He was eager to inform Beverly about the development. Susan's pointed question brought him back to earth. Do you really believe that everything will be all right after spending a weekend with your wife and welcoming these youngsters into your life? Not at all, Susan. We need to deal through a lot of emotions and old wounds. The kids will make things more complicated. We're trying to find a reputable marriage counselor. We'll speak with a family expert later on if things develop so that we can all adjust. There is one thing that is certain. We're still in love with one another, and we're growing close to those 2 girls. Bev sees this as an opportunity to put things right, and you know how determined she can be when she puts her mind to something? I have to keep her centered. Although it won't be simple, we both want to see it through to the end. Saul grinned. Okay, Dave said. Observing them grow will make all the difficulties you face worthwhile. I can assure you of that from experience. Remain committed, and you will reap benefits beyond your wildest dreams. Now go to work. You need to provide for your family. After a few hours of work, Dave told himself he wasn't very productive. Ari leaped into his arms and gushed to him about her day and her new friends as soon as he picked her up. The facilities director gave him a smile. Prepare yourself for this. She is extremely intelligent, so testing her in a few years could be helpful. We may have to keep her interested. In case you have any inquiries, here is a list of the necessary supplies. We can help you both understand what's expected if her mother calls us. I hope you have a pleasant evening. Ari, goodbye." The woman hummed cheerfully and ruffled Ari's hair before leaving. After helping Ari find a seat, he inquired about her dinner preferences. She said, "Chicken." Beverly had picked up a few toys, so he got them and arranged them so he could see her while grilling. Observing her unique fondness for a plush dog, he pondered over her potential reactions to a live animal. The older girls would be coming home soon, and her birthday was approaching. Ari laughed and ran to them. Beverly picked her up and put her on her hip as though that was how she usually did things. Ari eagerly attempted to tell them about her experiences at school with Miss Rose, one of her teachers, and her friends. Marcia appeared a little confused, but Dave planted a soft peck on her cheek. Dave then planted a kiss on Beverly. "Get changed, girls. Ari and I made dinner, and it's almost ready." Ari followed them into the house, singing and laughing as she tried to hold both their hands. 10 minutes later, they came back, all changed into comfy clothes. They swiftly set the picnic table, poured tea and lemonade, served the chicken, and placed the vegetables on a wide platter. Ari had just returned from Bible school at a small church the week before. She grasped his hand and murmured, "Grace." They all clasped hands while he thanked God for the food and the girls. That was enough for Ari, who screamed, "Amen!" As she pointed to the roasted carrots, Bev assisted her with her plate, slicing everything into small pieces. That night, after their usual routine of bathing, tails, and rocking, Bev cuddled next to him. She looked to want to bring something up but didn't know how. "Drink. We pledged to be honest with each other. If anything upsets you, just share." "Why did we quit attending church?" she inquired. Brief response. "We became very preoccupied." "Why? Why was that brought up?" "Ari demanded that we say grace. We must locate a church. A visit from social services would seem nice. It doesn't look nice, therefore I don't want to go to church. I believe it would be advantageous for us as well as the two girls. We might participate in events and make new acquaintances. Let's talk about it before the weekend with the females." She appeared pleased by that and grinned broadly. Ari knocked on the door the following morning, furious that she was unable to get in. While Bev slipped into her robe and unlocked the door, Steve hurried to the restroom. Bev calmed Ari, who stopped crying soon after. The next night, she promised him there would be no more locked doors. "We'll leave the door open when we're through if we need some alone time." You get it? Over the following few weeks, they settled into a routine. Ari was often the first to wake them awake, jumping on the bed to give them hugs and kisses and talking excitedly about school. Bev was teaching Marcia cosmetics techniques, and she would get ready for work while they toyed with Ari looking put together. Dave felt worried since Marcia appeared much older than 18. Bev would chuckle at his worries. It is widely known that she is the boss's daughter. Although she's in a professional atmosphere, people will still notice her. Jen and I watch her closely. She hasn't gone on many dates, in my opinion, because of her home life. She'll be pretty well liked when she starts dating. Have you located that firearm yet? Dave smiled and asked. Yes, and I did purchase a buckshot package. She laughed again and proceeded to have breakfast. Their grandfather visited the residence 3 weeks after the girls had been living with them. Dave, Beverly, and Ari were out shopping when he arrived, and Marcia stayed home to make dinner. He asked to see the girls when he knocked on the door. Marcia attempted to calm him down by explaining that they preferred to remain in their current location, but he grew quite agitated. She thought maybe he had been drinking. They put Ari to bed later, and she told them all about the experience. Dave was going to confront him the following day, but Beverly talked him out of it. I'll give Mrs. Ingalls a call. She is aware of what to do. The expert in family law was Mrs. Ingalls. Susan had suggested a former judge. She was highly picky about her customers and only took on a small number of cases at a time. She was nice, and Ari enjoyed playing with her beautiful silver hair while sitting on her lap. She was tough, too, though. She clarified that giving the sister custody should be quite simple. She has a reliable job, a lovely house, and is well-groomed. Given your recent separation, things could get more complicated if you become involved. Marcia is of legal age, so you cannot adopt her. but she may legally adopt a different name or be identified as your daughter. Your respective financial situations and excellent occupations should help your argument. Even if the grandfather would provide difficulties, social services would find it difficult to give him custody. If Marcia declines to come back, his attitude and age will be a liability. Aim to avoid provoking him. Permit him to see the daughters on a few supervised visits. Would be more comfortable with you. He can push back, and we'll fight back. After Bev told Mrs. Ingalls about the incident, she made a commitment to set up a social services inspection of their house and preliminary interviews. They'll also go back to the grandfather to see if there's anything to indicate he might not be able to offer a proper home. Given his age and condition, they might be able to convince him to let the girl stay with you. We'll have to wait and see. Be cautious in the interim. Social services visited their house to do an assessment and speak with Dave and Beverly. It was evident that the officials were taken aback by the pristine and hospitable residence. Unaware of the circumstances, Ari was her typical upbeat self, excited to show them her toys and plush animals, who kept chatting away. She led them outdoors to view her newly acquired vibrant swing set and sandbox. Marcia maintained her composure while praising the home's cozy and affectionate ambiance. It felt like the first real home they had ever known, she said, sniffling a few times. Sadly, the grandfather's life had not gone as planned. When they arrived, the house was disorganized, with a sink and counter piled high with used takeout containers and dirty dishes from their time together, as Marcia had done most of the cooking and cleaning. Beverly and Dave were reassured by Mrs. Ingalls that everything had gone well in their interview and that it appeared certain. Marcia took up the role of Ari's legal guardian a month later. Since the grandfather never paid them a visit, Marcia eventually took Ari to meet him with Dave in tow. He slammed the door in their faces and wouldn't let them in. After a moment of sadness, Ari smiled and asked to cuddle on the big hammock David had found. Dave, Marcia, Ari, and Beverly could all fit easily within. The fact that they had to lie down together made them chuckle. Marcia would chuckle as she threw Ari onto them, and Dave would draw Beverly closer and lean back. Marcia would then take a seat next to Beverly, and the three of them would softly sway together. It usually put them to sleep. Beverly will never forget the day Marcia asked to cuddle with Dave instead of anyone else. Occasionally, she would discover them dozing off in the hammock, with Ari snuggled in between them. She took images of those times, which Marcia then posted on social media with the comment, "Snuggling with our dad." Dave startled everyone by storming out of the room when Beverly showed him the photos. In the backyard, she discovered him sobbing. He gave her a firm hug. "I'm simply overburdened. It's something I never would have imagined seeing." He went back inside and kissed and hugged both of the girls. He would have liked to tell people that getting married counseling was simple and just took a few sessions, but that was not the reality. Their therapist was incredibly astute. To find out why they had broken up and what motivated them to get back together, she arranged for them to meet separately. Throughout the sessions, she shared her observations. They yelled at one another, sobbed, and held each other tightly as though they couldn't bear to part. She led them through the procedure and assisted them in analyzing their feelings at the conclusion. It dawned on him that his deepest animosity stemmed from her virtually single choice not to have children. She was angry at Dave for bringing it up from time to time. In the end, they gained a lot of knowledge. The key lesson was that they had been so preoccupied with their jobs that they had forgotten about their marriage. Although he was proud of her achievements, he was also annoyed by the way she occasionally downplayed him as her career progressed. Despite his talent as a salesman, she thought he lacked the drive to succeed. With a laugh, he said, "Our marriage would have ended long ago if we were both like you." She started crying at that, but as she stopped, she realized what he was getting at. When she said that she felt like she was the one running their family, she knew it upset him. He eventually came to the realization that she was partially correct, and he didn't begin to fight back until she totally disregarded him. Sometimes they didn't say much when they got home, still upset. Upon sensing their emotional states, Ari would oscillate between them, attempting to cuddle until they both felt better. Naturally anxious, Marcia would remain near them until they lifted her onto their laps, whereupon Beverly would reassure her. The day Ari ran toward him when he picked her up from daycare was an experience he would never forget. "Dad!" He hauled her up when she screamed. Upon hearing the other children refer to their parents as Mom and Dad, she concluded that this was the proper way for things to be. He composed himself and said that if he was the father, then Beverly was the mother. After realizing, she leaped to her feet and ran towards Beverly, carrying a handcrafted dinosaur adorned with tiny red puffs. "Look what I made for you, Mom." Beverly might pass out, Dave thought. The tears started to come. Dave and Marcia observed for a little while before she told him, "Well done, Dad." He was also moved to tears by that. Beverly had the dinosaur on display in her workplace until she retired, displaying it in a shadow box. Waiting, she stood in their home's hallway. Marcia was standing next to her, embracing her hand. It had been almost 2 years since Dave and Beverly set out on their reunion tour. As the music started, this was the last action. Marcia extended the door to let her in. Beverly thought back to their previous discussion. "I'm grateful, Mama. I appreciate your loving house, Dad, and your belief in me. I can't believe that next year I'll be a junior in college. I swear to try my hardest. I have an amazing role model." Beverly gave her a strong hug while attempting to preserve her cosmetics. "I ought to be saying thank you. I almost lost everything. My career had collapsed. After my husband left, I felt empty. I then attended the cookout in an attempt to reclaim my life. Not only did I win my spouse back, but I also acquired a family. Have I expressed to you my love and pride for both you and Ari?" Marcia chuckled. "You say that each and every day. I will not grow weary of hearing it for another 30 or 40 years. Now adjust your countenance. It's almost time." Their friends greeted Beverly with applause and cheers as she entered the room. At the altar, grinning, was the reverend of the Episcopalian church they had been attending for the last 14 months. There were also their age group friends present. Jen, her spouse, and their little boy had even arrived by plane. While Susan, dressed similarly to Marcia and Ariana, took her place on the other side of Marcia, Saul stood next to Dave. Standing there with a basket of rose petals in front of her, their 6.5-year-old daughter Ari was accompanied by their dogs, Sunny and Sugar, who had small cushions strapped to their backs. After a few periods of admiring the lovely sight, Dave started to move up the red carpet, Ari arranging rose petals in front of him. The dogs trailed close behind. In front of the Reverend, they shook hands and reiterated their vows. To everyone's amazement, Ari gave Dave a ring. He'd taken it to the jeweler to be cleaned, and now a new, dazzling band capped it off. When he put it on her finger, she grinned, glancing at the ring she had received as a birthday present from the girls. The 2 stones are gently glinting in the dusk light. As the Reverend questioned who was bringing her away, a tear started to fall down her cheek. With pride, Saul answered, "Their daughters do." For Dave, it was one of the most significant days. The first was Ari's first marriage to Beverly. The second was the signing of the adoption paperwork that permitted Ari to assume their last name. When he informed Marcia that, in order to complete their family, she would also take their name, she became quite distraught. Placing the beautiful ring on her finger, he grinned. It stood for both their history and a new beginning. Already he was planning the present he would give her on their 30th anniversary. Following their vows and kiss, she demanded everyone's attention. "I'm grateful to everyone that attended. These 2 old buddies are brand new. Tonight, there's one more reason to rejoice." She clasped his 2 hands in her own and whispered the last thing he expected to hear. "I visited the doctor yesterday, honey. It was to validate a gut feeling I had. I'm 8 weeks along with my pregnancy. Though I'm not sure how it happened, I consider it to be a beautiful gift. And it's a girl, too." As everyone began to applaud and shout, Joy and Dave unexpectedly passed out. Just like they had watched Marcia obtain her college degree 10 years earlier, Beverly and Dave watched Ari cross the stage to receive her high school diploma. Ari would be attending the same university as Marcia after receiving honors in her graduation. With his 4-year-old grandson nestled on his knee, Dave smiled at Marcia, who returned the gesture while clutching his twin sister. Dave, however, believed Beverly was a fantastic mother. That was nothing beside her love for the grandchildren. The home that Marcia received from her grandfather was renovated to accommodate her family. Because a path connected their backyards, it was simple for them to view the grandchildren. When the time came, Dave even separated 2 acres to build an area house. For the animated little child who was wriggling between Beverly and him, he also purchased a land nearby. Haley exuded boundless vitality. Never stops moving. Ari, who had followed her older sister everywhere ever since she could walk, was the only person who could soothe her. He felt uneasy thinking about Haley growing up. Beverly gracefully ended her corporate career at the age of 50 by retiring. She had successfully negotiated the company's merger with a South Korean enterprise, saving it. Everyone saw it as a win-win situation, and she became known for her exceptional business acumen. He attempted to persuade her to accept a new task when the chairman paid her a visit to supervise the merger. They talked in her office, where he looked at pictures of brightly colored dinosaurs and dragons. "I apologize, but I want to savor every moment of this new phase of my life. My youngest recently turned 11 years old. Both my oldest and middle daughters are off to college. But—" He gave a knowing smile. "With that one, we could have blown it. It still amazes me that she chose to work for the Koreans. Assure her that her return is always welcome. Should something not work out, I will inform her. However, it is improbable. Marcia is doing well at the company, and Jen is enjoying her new position. Although it is a little awkward for them to use her as an example of their diverse hiring, she is a well-respected and proven individual. In order to help her learn from the finest, the owner's granddaughter also helps." They chuckled together. "I had to give it a shot. Beverly, good luck. Remember to send in photos of the grandchildren. Think back to the consultant role we spoke about. You could spend as much time as you like working on projects that pique your interest. I would hate for all of my training efforts to be in vain. I swear I'll give it some thought, and feel free to ask me any questions at any moment. I appreciate your unwavering support. It has great significance." He looked shy a little. "It was worth it for you. Beverly, goodbye." She shed tears onto his jacket as she gave him a deep, heartfelt hug. Before she let him go, he gave her a tender pat. She eventually realized that she would provide them with part-time consulting. She was fine with it as long as it was temporary and didn't necessitate extended absences. She considered the beginning of the youngest grandchild's school year to be the ideal time, as she was extremely skilled in her work. Dave cooled down a charge that represented Hurricane Haley by glancing at Haley as she twitched. "It's nearly done." She grinned at Dave, and he thought back to the moment he found out she was getting married. After counseling and court appearances to adopt their kids, Bev and Dave made the decision to reaffirm their vows in celebration of their marriage's rebirth and the completion of their family. When she suddenly revealed the surprise to him, he was already feeling overwhelmed. At 38, she was expecting a child. Although she wasn't sure how it happened, she surmised that her cold medication might have had a role. She would occasionally look away from him, and he could tell it was deliberate. He would have been delighted if she had simply asked, but he was concerned she may be scared. He would decline. He passed out upon hearing the news. He awoke to find his head on her lap and her weeping, frantic and contrite. He concluded a kiss would be the most effective method to console her, a moment that seemed to go on forever. She knew he was happy after that, despite his incessant worry. Bev had an easy pregnancy and kept working until 3 weeks before the baby was due, at which point he insisted she quit. Haley was with Beverly when he finally arrived. He marveled as the tiny baby entwined her tiny fingers around one of his, feeling fortunate to introduce his newest daughter to her. It had a profound effect on him that would never fade. He captured the expression on Bev's face when she met their daughter for the first time, and he would watch it every time he was feeling low or anxious and would always feel better. Saul and Susan, their grandparents, were waiting with Marcia, who was preoccupied with Ari. Many believed they were blood relatives since they had embraced them into the family with such ease. There were enough tears in the room to fill a bathtub when they went in to hold the baby, but they were all thrilled. The relationship between Ari and Haley strengthened over time. When Ari first arrived, she was so little that she believed she was a member of their family. She was devastated to discover the truth. Though you may not be related by blood, Bev consoled her by explaining that you are related by love. We have chosen to be in love with you. I knew you were ours as soon as I saw you fiddling with my jewelry. Nothing will make you any less our daughter. Never forget that. After Beverly retired, he worked for a few more years before deciding to follow her example. Saul was troubled by his daughter's struggles and disapproved of the direction she seemed to be going. She was severely touched by Saul's passing and felt adrift for a spell. When Bev reached out and encouraged her to get back in touch with life, she started to heal, relating their personal tale. When was the last time you planned a pleasant evening for your hubby as a surprise? You must keep in mind that losing what matters is not worth the loss of this place. It's not what Saul would want for you. He did a wonderful job juggling career and family. It's possible for you too. She must have been motivated by her remarks because she assigned tasks to others and enlisted enough assistance to reduce her workload. She surprised her spouse with a second honeymoon in a tropical destination when she felt ready. Every day they looked forward to spending time together, and she delighted him even more when she revealed that, in preparation for their trip, she had given up taking birth control and was hoping for a child. Almost 9 months later, their first son was born. With more time on their hands, Beverly and Dave began crossing things off their bucket list, things they had always desired to do. They purchased an RV with a motor and traveled the country during the summers, frequently taking 1 or 2 grandchildren with them. Although Haley liked to hang out with her elder sisters, she occasionally joined them. They surprised everyone by spending a month on the island of Crete, which Beth had always wanted to see. They first went to Portugal, then to Spain, Italy, and France after spending a month back at home. They finally concluded that Crete was their favorite. After buying a beautiful 4-bedroom home on 10 acres with grapevines, citrus trees, and even a few olive trees, they spent half the year there. After graduating from college, Ari spent a month there with friends, and Marcia came for a 2-week visit. After she graduated from high school, Haley also started talking about using the house for herself and her friends. Dave wasn't all that enthused about the concept. Among the words Bev learned to say in the area, "Let's jump in the pool and have some fun," was one of her favorites. When Beverly decided to wear a bikini, she still looked amazing at 15.